Faites l'appel, s'il vous plaît, monsieur le greffier.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Hélier. Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Bernard.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de la Trinité. Présent. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre. Madame le connétable de Saint-Martin.
Présente.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Jean.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément. Monsieur le connétable de Gruville.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Ouen.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Sainte-Marie.
Présent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Sauveur.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Southern. Madame le deputy Labby.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Tadier.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Luce. Madame le deputy Doublé.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Morel.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Lehegara. Monsieur le deputy Ayer. Monsieur le deputy Ward.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Owls.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Gardner.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Gorse.
Présent.
Monsieur le deputy Farnham. Madame le deputy Moore.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Mezek. Monsieur le deputy Joseph. Monsieur le deputy Balash. Monsieur le deputy Coles. Madame le deputy Poré. Monsieur le deputy War.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Miles.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Scott.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Renouf. Madame le deputy Curtis. Madame le deputy Feltham.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Binet.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Jeune.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Miller.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Howe.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Binet. Monsieur le deputy Ferry.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Kovac.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Curtis. Madame le deputy Ward.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Wilson.
Présente.
Madame le deputy Stevenson.
Présente.
Monsieur le deputy Andrews.
Monsieur le doyen.
Notre aide soit au nom de Dieu qui a fait les cieux et la terre. Amen. Seigneur Dieu, Père éternel et tout-puissant, qui a établi le gouvernement et les puissances de la terre pour le règlement et pour la conduite du peuple, et qui nous a commandé d'avoir toujours pour but la gloire de ton saint nom. Nous te prions que te plaise de donner à cette assemblée le don de conseil et de prudence, d'unir les cœurs et les affections de tous ceux qui la composent, de la conduire tellement toi-même par ton Saint-Esprit, que toute leur délibération est accompagnée de ta bénédiction. Réussisse au bien et au soulagement du peuple, qu'il t'a plu de commettre à leurs soins. Car nous t'en prions au nom et par le mérite de ton Fils bien-aimé Jésus-Christ, notre Seigneur, qui nous a enseigné à t'invoquer en disant: Notre Père, qui es aux cieux, ton nom soit sanctifié, ton règne vienne, ta volonté soit faite sur la terre comme au ciel. Donne-nous aujourd'hui notre pain quotidien, et nous pardonne nos offenses, comme nous pardonnons à ceux qui nous ont offensés. Et ne nous envoie point en tentation, mais délivre-nous du mal. Car à toi est la règne, la puissance et la gloire, au siècle des siècles. Amen.
Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Laurent est malade.
Vous jurez que Madame le connétable de Saint-Laurent est tellement indisposée qu'elle ne peut pas assister aux États sans exposer sa santé. Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Pierre.
Sir, as I reported yesterday, the Connétable of Saint-Pierre is on a conference, a CPA conference in the Isle of Man. I ask that he be marked as excusé on state's business, sir.
State's business.
Monsieur le connétable de Saint-Clément.
So the connétable is at a hospital appointment this morning and will be in as soon as the appointment is finished. And could he be marked excusé, please?
Yes.
Monsieur le deputy Southern.
Présent.
Madame le deputy Lehegara.
So Deputy Lehegaro is accompanying a family member to a hospital appointment and will be in as soon as she can.
Excusez.
Monsieur le Deputy Farnham.
Défaut.
Monsieur le Deputy Balash.
So Deputy Balash is on the same conference in the Isle of Man. I ask that it be marked as excusé on States business.
States business.
Madame le Deputy Porre.
Sir, Deputy Parrai is currently accompanying a family member to hospital treatments. She will be back, but she may have to leave again, so if I could ask the Leader of the Assembly for her to be excusé.
Excusez.
Monsieur le Deputy Renouf.
Sir, can I ask that Deputy Renouf is marked excusé? He's dealing with a sensitive personal family matter to which he alluded at the last sitting.
Yes, very well. Si les États sont constitués. Very well, we resume public business, and the next item of public business is the Jersey Overseas Aid Commission reappointment of non-states Commissioner P.18, lodged by the Minister for International Development. The main responder is the Chair of the Economic and International Affairs Scrutiny Panel, and I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to reappoint Therese Morel as a non-States Commissioner of the Jersey Overseas Aid Commission, effective immediately for a 3-year period until April 2028, in accordance with the Jersey Overseas Aid Commission Jersey Law 2005.
Minister.
Thank you, sir. I would like to propose Ms Therese Morel to serve for a further term of 3 years on the Jersey Overseas Aid Commission as one of the 3 non-state commissioners. This will be Ms Morel's 3rd term of office. I believe we are extremely lucky to have people like Ms Morel and her calibre willing to give up their time voluntarily, as Jersey Overseas Aid Commissioners are not paid. Ms Morel has had extensive experience over 3 decades of humanitarian experience working for the UN. I'd like to also thank Scrutiny for their supportive comments. And I'd like to make the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Right, is the proposition seconded?
Yes, sir.
Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? No member wishes to speak. I close the debate. Those in favour of adopting the proposition kindly show. Those against? Proposition is adopted on the standing vote. Very well. The next item is extension of eligibility criteria for election candidates, P20, lodged by Deputy Alves, and the main responder is the Chair of the Privileges and Procedures Committee, and I ask the greffier to read the proposition.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to request the Privileges and Procedures Committee to bring forward all necessary legislative amendments in time for the general election in 2026 to extend the criteria for qualification to stand for and be elected to the States of Jersey to include any individual who is not a British citizen, provided that they have 1. Met the conditions for permanent entitled status under the Control of Housing and Work, Residential and Employment Status Jersey Regulations 2013, and 2. Passed the Knowledge of Life citizenship test.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. Since being elected, I've sat through a number of debates on propositions seeking to widen the eligibility for election candidates. While some proposals have come close, none have fully addressed the concerns raised. Today, sir, I believe I present a viable compromise that strikes the right balance. Jersey prides itself on being a vibrant, inclusive and diverse community. It is also in a unique position as one of the very few places in the world that has a Control of Housing and Work law as comprehensive as ours. In that law, we recognise that those who have dedicated a significant proportion of their life to the island should be granted a special residency category of permanent entitled status, which rewards their commitment to this island. This proposition seeks to provide further acknowledgement of the value that those who have permanent entitled status have to our island by enabling them to be eligible to stand for election and provide an opportunity to have a say on how our island is run. Our housing and work laws already recognise long-term residents' contributions through permanent entitled status, so why shouldn't our electoral system do the same? Sir, it has been mentioned before that there are other jurisdictions which allow non-local citizens to stand for election to Parliament, and I will briefly highlight some of these. In the UK Parliament, Irish citizens or Commonwealth citizens with indefinite leave to remain can run for MP. In Scotland and Wales, since the recent reforms in 2021, any legal residents, these are long-term residents with leave to remain, who are not just British, Irish or Commonwealth citizens, can stand for election to the Scottish Parliament and to the Senedd Cymru, and therefore be elected as NSPS members of the Scottish Parliament, or MSS members of the Senedd, which is the Welsh Parliament. In Portugal, sir, non-citizen residents from Brazil and Cape Verde can run for elections to Parliament. And in Uruguay, foreigners with 15 plus years of residence can stand for election in some political roles. So what does this mean for Jersey? Jersey, in allowing long-term committed residents to stand for election, would not be unprecedented. Scotland and Wales already permit any legal resident to run for their parliaments, making them amongst the most inclusive electoral systems in the UK. In addition to the requirement for permanent entitled status, I am also asking members to agree that that islanders should be required to sit and pass the Knowledge of Life citizenship test. I took the inspiration from the narrowly defeated proposition by Deputy Gardner last term, but simplified it by making reference to a test that is already a requirement in order to obtain a British passport. It is part of the naturalisation process and available to sit locally at Highlands College for a reasonable fee of £62. We know that the biggest barrier for most wishing to obtain a British passport is the cost. The naturalisation process currently costs £1,500, and this is set to increase next week on the 9th of April to £1,605. The process can also take up to 6 months to be completed. Quoting from the Gov website, you can apply for naturalisation if you have lived in the UK or the islands, Jersey, Guernsey or Isle of Man, for 5 years or more, hold indefinite leave to remain or settled status granted under the EU settlement scheme, hold indefinite leave to remain, and you must have lived in the UK or islands for a period of 12 months or more after being granted indefinite leave to remain, and you meet the requirements of the Knowledge and Language Life test. You can also be eligible to apply for naturalisation if you're married to a British citizen, and have lived in the UK or islands for 3 years or more, hold indefinite leave to remain or settled status granted under the EU settlement scheme, and again, meet the requirements of the Knowledge and Language Life test. Sir, members may not be aware of this, but we have people in our community who are born in Jersey but were not able to apply for a British passport. How does this happen? This is normally due to their parents not having settled status at the time of birth or 5 years residency prior to the birth of their children. So these children are left with no choice but to have a non-British passport. So even those who are born on the island would have to go through the naturalisation process in order to obtain a British passport at a later date. This proposition seeks to enable those who satisfy the criteria for naturalisation to stand for election, but without the barrier of the cost of the naturalisation process. So to conclude, I would like to thank PPC for publishing their comments, and I acknowledge that the legislative changes required would take place within the 12 months before the next election. However, this proposition does not seek to create a big electoral change which significantly impacts on our electoral composition and voting process, as P.20 2025 did. It would simply enable more people in our community to be eligible to stand as a candidate and the chance to do so. This is not about making a radical change to our electoral system. It is about fairness, about recognising those who have devoted their lives to Jersey, and about strengthening our democracy. So, sir, I urge members to support this proposition and remove this unnecessary barrier to representation. Thank you, sir.
Proposition seconded.
So, may I remove the defo and Deputy Farnham, please?
Was agreed left defo? Yes, defo is raised on the Chief Minister. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. Earlier this week, this chamber hosted members of Lemoy School. And as often happens in these school visits, one of them asked me if I found my job fun. I said, I find learning fun, and being a States member gives me ample opportunity to do so. In the report accompanying this proposition, Deputy Owl stated it is not her intention to revisit points raised in previous propositions or debates. She did not explain why this proposition does nothing to address national security implications. I have no individual islanders in mind when objecting to this proposition. I may have citizens of other countries in mind that the UK may regard as a risk to national security. States members learn from debates, sir, including of the risks of making policy in silos. It therefore remains perplexing that despite what has been raised in previous debates on this matter, no work to address national security concerns has been sought by the bringer of the proposition. We are in very difficult times. There has been no change in that position since 3 months ago. We also know that the island's national security measures are not nearly evolved enough. That is why, in my delegated ministerial capacity, I'm working on a cybersecurity law to bring before the States Assembly. There is so much more work to do, including on the basis on which States members access current systems. Even now, there are discussions about the extent to which they should be vetted. The ultimate protection we have at this moment, crude and blanket as it may be, is that our elected representatives are not loyal to any foreign power that we do not regard as having a constitutional link, because nearly every nation in the world requires candidates for parliamentary election to be citizens of that country or countries with which it has a clear link under its constitutional law. Other than Guernsey, of course. Sir, I do not wish to respect our sister island, but it is further behind the curve than we are. Where is Guernsey's cybersecurity law? Where is Guernsey's National Cybersecurity Centre? Guernsey has some work to do, and its published cybersecurity strategy acknowledges that. My priority as a member of the Council of Ministers is to improve this island's national security, not to weaken it. Our own security position is supported by our constitutional relationship with the UK and our relationship with the NCSC. When we last debated this matter, I informed the Assembly that there would be potential national security implications to consider in adopting a proposition like this. The officer of vice I sought recommended seeking input on the associate risks before departing from UK practice. Operationally, there may be challenges with non-British citizens having access to information that may be necessary to fulfil the role of a minister. In the last debate, Deputy Tadier made the point that citizenship alone is not enough to secure national loyalty. He referred to a notorious case of a British citizen who passed on national secrets to another country, compromising national security. None of these cases so far as I'm aware involved elected parliamentarians. The closest I can remember was the Perfumer affair, in which a minister in the UK government resigned after not giving adequate regard to national security. As for the other cases, they were notorious. A government system that should have given the highest regard to national security failed its own citizens. Should we not seek a loyalty that is consistent with our constitutional ties? We already do. This proposition seeks to undermine it. That's not to say we could not find other ways of securing national loyalty, but we would need to debate how we do that before considering a proposition like this. For example, China has legislation requiring loyalty. It's law. Article 7 of its National Intelligence Law states, after translation in English, that Chinese citizens are required, in quotes, translated, to support, assist and cooperate with national intelligence efforts in accordance with law and shall protect national intelligence work secrets they are aware of. Now, that proposition only applies to Chinese citizens, sir, presumably because the Chinese don't allow non-Chinese citizens positions of authority that could put national security at risk. So, how does the bringer of this proposition propose that we deal with the risks to national security? There may be people in our community happy to leave the front door unlocked, but that's not our policy as a responsible government. Should our island community accept that public representatives may have a conflicting obligation to another country? Or should there be a list in our legislation of acceptable jurisdictions in which candidates for election may be citizens, notwithstanding conflicting loyalties? How would that list be managed and maintained, and by whom? Any decisions about such a list would be highly subjective and controversial. It would not be straightforward to maintain. Finally, I question why the bringer of this proposition is seeking that the changes she seeks be brought in time for the 2026 election. I know I'm not alone in noting the Deputy's haste. This proposition seeks implementation by the Privileges and Procedures Committee. As with the proposition to reinstate senators in time for the 2026 election, the PPC has raised a concern regarding timing. Less consistently, the PPC hasn't brought an amendment to change the reference to the 2026 election to the 2030 election. Given that the proposition to reinstate senators in time for the 2026 election was adopted by the States Assembly, is there not more reason to have sought a change of this nature in time for the 2030 election in this proposition? What is the rush? Work to address the national security implications of a proposition such as this has not been done by the government. Nor does this proposition even seek that it be done. If it did, I would recommend to the States Assembly that it wouldn't perhaps be such a priority as the cybersecurity law, because improving national security must come first. The cost of formally becoming a UK citizen was raised in former debates. There has been no proposition brought to address the costs of doing this for candidates, and it does remain for supporters of any particular candidate to help find the costs. I therefore urge the States Assembly to reject this proposition. I fear it has been brought for hastily without due regard to the interests of national security or the ability of this government to work further in those areas in this term. And national security has to be our priority to the community as a whole in Jersey, whether or not they are British citizens. Thank you, sir.
Very much,
would the member give way for a point of clarification on her speech?
Would you give way for a point of clarification?
Yes, of course, sir.
Thank you, and I believe it is. The member suggested that our existing system means our members are only or solely loyal to our own nation, and I genuinely wondered if she could clarify what she means by only loyal to kind of our nation, just so we could, because I didn't quite understand that.
Yes, I apologise if I was unclear. The point I was making was that the general rule about having British citizens or those connected in some way to the UK, us, under constitutional arrangements, there is an assumption, and I accept it's an assumption, that those who are regarded as citizens of those countries have some sort of loyalty. Thank you.
Very well. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition?
Thank you, sir. One area of this proposition that concerns me is that it's a methodology for circumventing the naturalisation process. To which end, sir, and picking up from the comments of the previous speaker, I wonder, and it may be for the Solicitors General to answer, in the process of naturalisation, are there background checks on the individuals applying? Is that an area for the respondent, or?
I'm not sure that the Solicitor General would necessarily be aware of that. Are you aware of that position, Mr. Solicitor?
I'm not, and I'm not sure it's a request for legal advice.
No, that would be probably fair observation. I'm afraid I can't assist either. I'm not sure if there are background checks for. The individual obviously takes an oath to be loyal to the sovereign before the Royal Court and does a separate oath, I believe, at Government House. But I can't say anything further than that.
Thank you, sir. Maybe I can ask the proposer to elaborate on that when she finishes up the proposition. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak? If no other member wishes, Deputy Joseph.
So I'm surprised that nobody else wants to speak on this important issue, sir. I too am somewhat surprised that the member that's bringing this is standing in this assembly advancing something that is entirely contrary to everything that was discussed and debated in this assembly in the recent matter of the senatorial debate. It seems odd, sir, that the party in which she is a member can effectively stand 1 week and speak about the Venice Commission, a cornerstone of electoral law, as we heard rightly members of the Reform Party say, electoral guidance that advises elections, legislation shall be enacted sufficiently far in advance of an election date to provide political participants and voters with adequate time to become familiar with the rules of the election process. So this is not a trivial proposition, and I'm surprised that other members, maybe members, I don't know, we haven't debated it. We're going to end the debate, sir, because nobody else wanted to speak. This is not a trivial proposition. It must ensure that we, in debating this, that we remain a legitimate and credible jurisdiction. If adopted, this would see effectively, as PPC have rightly pointed out, and I don't think that they have amended this proposition. I can't speak for the chair of PPC. She's made her observations very clear, and her committee clear in her report. But it's quite clear that this is potentially a matter for the next assembly, but it is impossible because of the matters that Deputy Scott has raised, for us to have a legislative draft which has been appropriately scrutinised, as raised by the Constable of St Bullards, the security considerations, all the rest of it. I distance myself from aligning anything to do with Chinese national security law. I hope the member was not raising China as an example of democratic rule, because it is not, and the coercive nature of that particular article was an unfortunate but necessary comment in her speech, of which I know that members of Reform will jump to their feet, no doubt, when other members will speak on this, if this is not going through on some sort of, I'm not sure what the government's position is. In fact, I'm quite unclear what the government position is on this. It's a PPC a matter that has come before us, but we have an assistant minister who's brought yesterday something about entitled status. We've got another minister arguing against it, and I'm a backbencher, so that I'm a bit confused about where we stand. All I know is that the Venice Commission matters, and I think that a last-minute change, I won't be one that blocks the democratic decision of this Assembly on senators. That debate has been had, and had well. We have to take on balance the representations made by the Chief Minister that it won't interfere in the government programme. We take that on the standing of this Assembly in terms of being effectively factual. We've heard the opposition, we've had the debate, but this is clearly very different. This is something that surely must have proper scrutiny. It must be considered properly, because we're talking about members that could be elected in this Assembly. It's part of our democracy. We have a unique constitutional relationship with the Crown, and that demands that we uphold every time, every day, constantly, the highest standards of democratic legitimacy. Allowing non-citizens without a proper, and there's been numerous attempts to do this, but this is a last minute, because it's of the Venice Convention and legislation, this is a last minute issue which has not been, which will have to be scrutinised, let there be no doubt, it will have to be scrutinised properly, in a way that's more burdensome. Arguments about senators, we have had them before. This is an important proposition. I can see the chairman of Reform disagreeing with me, but allowing non-British citizens to serve as legislators in the States Assembly challenges the coherence of our constitutional framework. Jersey is not part of the United Kingdom, as members will know, sir. Our ties lie with the Crown, and we are a predominantly British, with Britain and Great Britain and the United Kingdom, as the External Relations Minister may rise to speak, which is our foreign policy, is set by the United Kingdom through the relationship with the Crown. British citizenship, therefore, surely matters. It underscores the allegiance that we have to the Crown. And so you made observations about the oath of allegiance that a British citizen must take. Permitting elected members to hold foreign passports introduced questions of loyalty and could compromise our governance, particularly matters affecting that relationship with the Crown. The criteria of permanent entitled status and the knowledge of a life test, whilst practical, do not fully address the issues of the matters that are an oath of office to the head of state. A 10-year residency and a basic test may demonstrate a commitment, but they fall significantly short, sir, of the deeper ties that citizenship represents. I simply say that it would be quite wrong for this Assembly to make a decision on eligibility to stand for this Assembly because the legislation clearly will fall significantly short of that 12-month international practice deadline. And this Assembly, I'm afraid, I'm a backbencher that is confused about the party and the government and where this is overlapping. And I think that we should not make a decision that undermines the credibility of what is already going to be an important election in 2026, where we are going to have to be relevant. We're going to have to convince more islanders to participate in that election to get our voter turnout up. And I'm afraid to say that having lengthy time and a lengthy period where scrutiny is going to have to scrutinise on the important issues of national security, etc., is going to compromise scrutiny's ability to hold the government to account on delivery, which is what we are about. We are an assembly that makes policy decisions and we do things to improve islanders' life. And I'm so sorry, sir, but using the valid time that this assembly is taking up on effectively trying to debate something at speed, then try to promise that we're going to legislate in line with international standards is going to simply undermine the thing that I stand up and regularly bore members with, sir, is that we're not actually delivering what our constituents and those that put us here are here, which is outcomes on cost of living, on housing, on other things that are absolutely at the heart of many islanders' concern. I can hear Deputy Ward speaking, so I don't normally overhear myself speaking, I don't think, when other people are speaking. So we are a proper parliament with proper standards, sir, and we should be abiding by those higher standards of parliamentary practice and not promising people that we're going to somehow safely, having regard to all of the international issues that is very clear in the world, that we're going to suddenly be able to deliver an oven-ready piece of legislation which is going to have regard to national security and all those issues that British citizenship commands. I say, no, sir. Let's get on with actually delivering what we're here to do, which is delivering for islanders, and then not have discussions more about either who is going to be here or what the eligibility criteria. That's a matter for the next assembly, sir, not now. It should have been done earlier, and this is not the first time that something's been brought to this assembly in this matter. If it should have been done earlier, and it's too late to do this sort of thing now. And I urge members to reject it and to support PPC's very proper comments paper. And I'm sorry, I've spoken for 9 minutes. But I'll give way if the Deputy Scott wishes to
What is your intervention, David?
Yes, I just wanted the police Deputy Ossoff to clarify which Deputy Ward he was referring to.
Do you...
I'm so sorry. It was Deputy Rob Ward who regularly chunters when members are speaking.
Well,
sir.
no, I'm sorry. You can't say regularly chunters.
Well,
A, that's
he
unparliamentary.
puts me off.
And
Sir,
B,
I
I'm
withdraw
not
that,
even
sir.
sure I know what it means. But
So it's basically making comments.
But yes, I take the point, and I was going to make an observation.
Thank you, sir.
When you had finished speaking.
So I apologise if that was an unparliamentary
But
use
I
of
think
but it's
to,
very
to
irritating.
accuse a member of regularly chuntering is probably not terribly.
No, I withdraw that, but he did so in my speech, so and it was off-putting. Thank you, sir.
So may I raise a point of order?
If it's a point.
So there is a standing order 104.2a, which the member must not unduly repeat themselves. Perhaps that needs to be applied if you're going to have proper parliamentary process. I noticed in the last speech that a number of points were repeated repeatedly. Thank you, sir.
Deputy, if I were totally, not having an exchange on this, if I were totally rigorous in the application of members not repeating themselves, we would probably last for an afternoon, because that is what happens. And members are not, I'm sorry, Deputy, A, you do not speak when the presiding officer is speaking, and B, the position is that sometimes members repeat themselves. I accept an element of leeway because people need to get into their stride, they need to circle on their arguments, and quite often people repeat themselves. When it becomes, and there have been examples in previous sittings of this assembly where certainly members have spoken in a repetitive way which far would exceed speeches thus far this morning. It has to be left to the presiding officer unless a proposition is brought to deal with the matter. It's perfectly reasonable for you to raise it as a point of order, but it's not a point of order that I apply in the current circumstances. And it would only be a legitimate point of order, I think, if you were asking me to interrupt the speaker during the currency of their speech to prevent further repetition. On the other matter that I wanted to mention, and I only do so because Deputy Ossoff has raised it as an issue, and I'm not pointing the finger at you at all, Deputy Ward, but I have noticed over the last couple of days that the background noise has got higher and higher when all members are speaking, and it's important that people are not put off from what it is they want to say. Therefore, I would ask members to exercise an element of restraint when they are having conversations between them. It's permissible, of course, to have conversations in the chamber. One hasn't got to sit in total silence, but it is quite important that level of conversation doesn't interrupt members when speaking. That's all I wished to say. Did you wish to make any other point that you wanted me to rule upon, Deputy Ward?
No, sir. I'll just carry on. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
May I kindly clarify a point that you've made?
If it's a point of order...
Well, yes, it is a point of order, sir.
Directed towards me,
yes, it is,
on which
sir.
you wish me to make a ruling.
Yeah, I wish you to make a ruling, sir. I rose to speak, sir, because you were just about to close the debate. And so I couldn't gather I had a speech ready and I was gathering...
No, that's not a point of clarification.
Well, I just wondered, sir, it's happened on a number of occasions that you closed the debate and people want to speak.
Deputy,
sorry, sir.
Please sit down. The position is that members do not have to speak in a debate. I allow a perfectly reasonable period for people to indicate their wish to speak, and they don't have to do so. Members clearly cliffhang from time to time and wait to participate at the very last minute, and that does happen. But from the moment I say the debate is closed, and it's too late to press your button. So the answer is, I fully understand why you may have felt driven to speak at that time, but that's not in any sense outside ordinary parliamentary practice in this Assembly. Very well. Point of order, Deputy Ward, you wish to speak? Yes, please. Connétable St Martin.
Thank you, sir. This has been commented in speeches that PPC did not make an amendment.
In the absence of PPC not bringing an amendment, I stand to put PPC's comments on record. In P20/2025, Deputy Elves is proposing amendments to the island's elections legislation that would allow for individuals who are not British citizens to stand for election to the States Assembly, provided that A, the individual has permanent entitled status under the Control of Housing and Work, Residential and Employment Status, Jersey Regulations 2013, and B, the individual has passed a knowledge of life citizenship test. PPC considered the proposition at its meeting on the 17th of March 2025. The committee's principal conclusion related to the timing of the deputy's proposition and the implications for when these measures would be introduced. As the committee highlighted in its amendment to P2/2025 Amendment 3, the Venice Commission sets out clear guidance on regulatory levels and the stability of electoral law, stating that election legislation should be enacted sufficiently far in advance of an election date to provide political participants and voters with adequate time to become familiar with the rules of the election processes. Election legislation enacted at the last minute tends to undermine the legitimacy and the credibility of the law and prevents political participants and voters from becoming informed in a timely manner about the rules of the election processes. The committee acknowledges that the Assembly ultimately rejected the amendment to P2/2025 and adopted that proposition, essentially accepting that the legislative changes required would take place within 12 months before the 2026 elections are to be held. Nevertheless, the committee highlights that this consideration of timescales also applies to Deputy Elves' proposition, in that, if adopted, the subsequent legislative work would see the changes developed and implemented within the 12-month period before the next elections. This would be contrary to the recommendations and principles of the Venice Commission. Members will therefore need to decide whether their decision to adopt P2/2025 was to be an exception to what the Venice Commission recommends, or whether it is an indication of the Assembly's policy and confirmation that any change to electoral legislation is now acceptable within a 12-month period. The Deputy did not discuss her proposition with the committee before lodging it, and PPC has therefore only had the lodging period to examine and consider what the Deputy is proposing. As the Deputy has highlighted, the qualification criteria for election have been subject to other debates in recent years, namely Senators and Deputies Candidates Qualifications P1 2017, Draft Conotab's Amendment No. 2, Jersey Law 2001, P12/2017, Senators and Deputies Removal of Citizenship Requirement, P3 2018, Senators and Deputies Removal of the Citizenship Requirement, P75 2020, Life in Jersey Test and Eligibility for Election, P2 2021, Draft Eligibility for Election Amendment and Laws, Jersey Law, P22/2021, and Public Elections Extension of Eligibility Criteria, P65/2024. Comments presented by the committee on P65/2024 summarise the earlier proposition. Neither the control of housing and work legislation nor the knowledge of life citizenship fall within the remit of the committee, and PPC does not therefore have operational experience in these areas. The committee is aware, however, of the proposed developments to control of housing and work legislation, which the Assembly is due to debate through consideration of P15/2025 and the accompanying amendment P15/2025 amendment. These regulations, if adopted, will have implications for how permanent and title status is determined, how it may be obtained, and how it may be lost. This will have a knock-on effect for implementation of Deputy Alves' proposition if adopted by the Assembly. So I hope that members will see that the PPC committee has been consistent. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Rob Ward.
So thank you, sir. I was messing around with you. Thank you, sir. I'll try and be a little more positive here. Let me reassure Deputy Joseph, sir. I think the reason we're waiting for him to speak is we all look forward so much to him speaking and listen to his wise words. So it's nice, sir, when we do that. Also, sir, I personally didn't speak straight away because I was thinking about what I would say, and this, what I think is quite a delicate area, and I'm slightly disappointed, sir, in the approach that's been taken so far regards national security. We have a community, a large community on this island that have committed to this island, that work, that pay their taxes. I was going to say that pay their taxes, but I'd be repeating myself, sir, but I wanted to emphasise the point. That pay their taxes, that enrich our community, that bring different cultures, different foods, different music, different experiences. They bring so much to this island. And many have committed to this island for many, many years, but kept their identity with wherever their home country is, call it what you want, but committed to Jersey. They've had to go through Brexit and go through the unpleasantness of having to apply for settled status to once prove their loyalty to this island, to being part of a UK system. And they've had to go through that. I've had constituents, and we both know people who said to me, I've been here 35 years, why have I got to do this? What do I need to prove? Unfortunately, something we didn't get a vote on, we had to deal with that. And today we stand in this assembly, and there's an implication suggested that if they don't take British citizenship, these very people who are committed to this island could be a threat to national security. So I'm stunned by that. And I would like to say to those people in the communities that we are part of every single day, that I don't agree that you will become a threat to national security by standing for this assembly. I actually think that you would bring, those communities would bring an insight into the communities that are part of this island. And a truly reflective democracy reflects the population of the island or the country or the jurisdiction or the area that it represents. And unless we are encompassing of that, we are not the welcoming island that the External Relations Minister mentioned yesterday, and I do agree with him on that. As chair of CPA, I'm very proud of how outward-looking we are, and I would like to, and I'll thank members, sir, and it is relevant, for their engagement in CPA. I think so many members have gone to so many different things and represented Jersey wonderfully. But that is part of a wider outlooking island, not one that will say that we want to exclude in some way people simply because they haven't taken the right type of test. And there is a qualifying period here for entitled status to stand. Plus, I'll make one really key point on this, is what anyone who stands for this assembly has to do is face the electorate. It is those people who are voting on this island who will decide whether we sit in this assembly. If you cannot convince the electorate in any way, you will not be elected to this assembly. And finally, sir, I have to say that having been through the debate on senators where, yes, it was the same comments from PPC, which were accurate, were mentioned, but they could be ignored at that stage. Those comments could be ignored and we could bring back serious change, senatorial change, which removes deputies from constituencies and removes that direct representation of constituencies. But we won't do that when we are trying to include and increase representation of people on this island. That is the contradiction that we need to consider when we talk about this legislation. So I thank the Deputy for bringing for this and being utterly consistent, as has Reform Jersey. I'll count, that's 5 times we've been mentioned today, if I can count my own. For being consistent in our approach. That's the type of politics that people want to see, consistency. Consistency in who we want to include on this island in their electoral system and who we say we value. So I hold a British passport by birth, by accident, because I was born in London. I've been here for 25 years. I started the day yesterday, sir, not having status to stay here forever, and I ended the day having that status. What a wonderful day that is for the island. I mean, for myself. So, but that is, again, I am in this circumstance. That circumstance changed, my rights changed. So I think we need to judge loyalty differently. There are members of this assembly who have dual passports. I respect them all equally for their loyalty to this island and the work that they do in this assembly, even if I don't agree with them. I respect that. I think we all have to have that respect. So I'd ask members to think very, very carefully before being taken in, I think so, by, I think, an argument which lacks validity in terms of national security and is a very non-subtle way of excluding people, and I want to detach myself from that. So I ask people to think very, very carefully about why they may not accept this amendment, this proposition, and ask them to support the Deputy in the work that she's doing. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. As Deputy House, I'll try to keep... It's my fourth or fifth debate on the theme, and I think people and members and everyone getting a bit tired, but it is important to debate. Actually, I looked back to my speech in 2020, and I looked to my speech in 2021. And when I hear 2030, I believe if we really want things done, it's about time that we get things done, or we'll say completely no, because last time this proposition was defeated only by one vote. I thought this assembly is more diverse and more progressive, but probably not. I don't know, we'll see today. As members are aware, immigration, citizenship, and identity, think about these three words: immigration, citizenship, and identity. They are very, very different words. Loyalty comes with identity. Loyalty comes with connection. And we don't have Jersey citizenship. And I raised it sometime, and I brought different propositions and tried to bring things together, because you've heard me speak. I do believe we need to have this connection. We need to have this identity. We do need to have this knowledge. And if we would have Jersey citizenship, I think this question would never rise in this assembly, because it would be very, very, very clear what it is. Some people, and I remember when I first arrived to my island, and my husband, he is Jersey, from his mum's side. His grandfather was very popular at the St. Bernard. He's very Jersey. And when I said, "You British," as new arriver, he raised and said, "I'm not British, I'm Jersey." And he was very, very proud, and I got an idea. British are not Jersey. It was on my first arrival 17 years ago. So a child born in Jersey is not automatically receive British citizenship. If we would have Jersey citizenship, the child would receive Jersey citizenship and would be eligible to stand for election. We do have a situation when children who are born in Jersey don't have British citizenship. Are they less loyal? I think the loyalty part is really raised with me today, that somebody asked about security. I think the connotab of St. Bernard asked about the security checks. If we are talking about security checks, you do need to sign two pages that people know you and recommend you. It should be your accountant or person like you as a deputy can sign the form, and you do run some police checks. To tell you the truth, how far it can go, I don't know. But if we are thinking about it, recently I had a conversation with the chief of the police about DBS checks. How many states members have DBS checks? Some have, some don't. But do we do this DBS check? We all work with people. We all work with vulnerable people. We at least the basic things that if we are already thinking about the checks that needs to be done when you are elected as a state member, I believe the DBS check needs to be run, and I believe on the same level, it can be run the same test that you do for the national checks. And to be honest, there are people who, I mean, we know occasionally, if you're born in the country, you're loyal to the country, this is the assumption, as Deputy Scott said, in most situations. But we all know that it's not 100% still. Now, I'm going back to life in Jersey and why I brought it in the first place. And actually, I'm looking at the many staff that are responsible for island identity. I kind of hope that we did have a bit more progress with island identity, type of citizenship, type of test, type of... I even suggested ceremony last time. As we all take a ceremony, I suggested somebody who passed citizenship test can go and to go through the ceremony to pledge eligibility, loyalty to Jersey Island, because we don't have citizenship. What about the test? And it's bringing me back to my Jewish heritage. In the Jewish tradition, in Torah, the first 5 Bible, in Kiddushim 40, and you know that I'm not religious, but I do connect to my Jewish roots very strongly. So in Jewish, we have a sentence saying, I'm translating it from Hebrew, so follow my translation if it's not perfect. Study leads to action, which means theory precedes and modifies practice. What does it mean? Because in Jewish tradition, we have lots of debates. The study are going through the debates. 2,000 years, Jewish leaders should find innovation solution to keep the national Jewish identity together. And learning, it was the only way to keep Jewish together when they were across all the world. Our identity, it's our story that we are telling for ourselves. And who we are, without knowledge, we cannot tell ourselves. So for me, learning about Jersey culture, Jersey tradition, and also British, because life in Jersey, the UK citizenship test, the Jersey citizenship test, you have life in the UK and life in Jersey. And there were questions that I've been asked. It's not knowledge, it's the way of we living in Jersey, the way of we communicate. I'm not sure if you had a chance to look through the questions, but there were some very interesting questions, not necessary to knowledge. I know it's not perfect, but I think saying we're in 21st century and we're developing our Jersey identity. Which way this debate would go, I would really look and encourage members to think what is the 21st century Jersey identity. And about the senators, I think that was a bit kind of, they voted this way. I don't think it's about the party. I did support the senators because the chief minister said we have legislative capacity, and I do believe for this should be the same legislative capacity when it's working together at the same time. So we cannot say yes for one and not for other one because it's coming together. And I believe if we are thinking about our Jersey residents, we have 28 residents, 38% of our residents, almost every 1 in 4 residents, English is their second language. So I assume they would have another citizenship. I don't know how many of them have UK or not. But telling for these people, 28% of the residents that they might be not loyal, I think it's really to take it from. I would also encourage PPC, if this proposition is adopted, to think about the ceremony. I know that it's not part of the proposition, but to make sure there is a loyalty and there is alliance and there is a communication. So this is where I am now, and I would be supporting.
Thank you very much. Deputy Tadier.
Thank you, sir. So I'm pleased to follow the last speaker, as the cliche goes. And before I start, can I just give my apologies for not being in the Assembly in person? I've just woken up, yesterday, too much detail probably, but I don't want to infect people is what I'm saying. I think I would be spreading my germs if I came in. So the previous speaker, I think, touched on something where this debate needs to go. And I think the first point I'd like to make is that this is a different debate. We haven't debated this yet. Members will know that probably I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to this issue, in the sense that I just think, let democracy do its thing. Take nationality out of the equation. Anybody who lives in Jersey and is a Jersey resident, if you like, let them put themselves up for election. If they have great ideas, the electorate might support that, and if they don't, then they won't get elected. But we've had those arguments, and as a Democrat, I accept that the arguments I put forward didn't find favour with the majority of members, sir. But I think there is some consensus to be had in this issue, because I don't think that everybody in the Assembly, whether it's this one or in the past, has been absolutely against the idea. And I think it first of all comes down to the question of what kind of assembly we are constitutionally. So are we a national assembly or are we a regional assembly? Because we've had we have Deputy Joseph saying that we are a British island and that we don't have autonomy over our foreign policy, and that our foreign policy is set by the United Kingdom and their politicians that we don't elect. And I think that's just true. We may or may not like it, but that is factual. But at the same time, we do tend to see ourselves as a national parliament, increasingly, I would say. And we know that we have very large amounts of autonomy, certainly when it comes to lawmaking and the raising of taxes and other policy areas which we can set. And so I think there's an element of both of those. And I think both of those would therefore point in the same direction. If indeed we were a regional assembly, i.e. the parent assembly is Westminster, House of Commons, House of Lords, and then we are one of the regional satellites, something which I don't accept, by the way. If that were the case, then that would give us a lot more latitude in terms of who would be able to stand for election. As Deputy Alves quite rightly explained earlier, the regional assemblies of Scotland, or the devolved assemblies or parliaments, I should call them, do have much wider criteria for who can stand for election and who is eligible. If we are, on the other hand, a national assembly, i.e. it's the Assembly of Jersey, the nation of Jersey, and we're increasingly talking about nationhood in a slightly more nuanced way, but it's becoming more understood that maybe we are a nation, because after all, we do have a national day, then it should be up to us to decide who we allow to stand for election. And the test really should be, are you a citizen not of a different country, a country that some of our islanders may never have been to, which is called the UK, or are you a citizen of Jersey, the island that you live in, that you work in, that you've maybe had children in? Is that the test we should apply? And it seems much more likely, as not speaking as a politician necessarily, but just as a citizen of Jersey, somebody with an interest in democracy, that the latter is where we should be looking for the membership of our assembly. Now, the previous speakers might have said, the public want us to be talking about the issues that are important to them. Absolutely correct. And I think the topical issues of the day are certainly things like housing, affordability, home ownership, cost of living. Those are probably some of the central issues, as well as education and maybe issues of just general security and safety of the island. But it's primarily, I would suggest, those first few. Who do we think we are to suggest that only we, or only the current eligibility of people who might put themselves forward, are the ones who have an opinion or indeed a solution on those issues? We had a debate yesterday when we did say we are an inclusive island and that we're a welcoming island, and that actually you can become an ordinary resident, a resident with right to remain in Jersey, irrespective really of where you come from, but because of how long you've been here. And I think that's a much more appropriate test to apply. I do have to mention, I don't want to dwell on it, sir, and colleagues, because indeed, this whole idea of national security, I see it as a red herring. I don't think this is the case for Deputy Scott by any means. She's raised it in the previous debate. But I think that when you hear those issues when I hear that from a member of the public, I'm thinking, is that what you really think, or is it just a smokescreen for prejudice, ultimately? Because are we really saying that, for example, and I don't like to use them as examples, are we saying that Deputy Gardner, Deputy Kovacs, Deputy Porre are potential spies because they have another nationality and that they're a threat to our national security, either in Jersey or as a British unit? I don't think we are at all, are we? Is the potential, but we could go one step further if we're going to get into this kind of McCarthyist paranoia about, are we going to say that actually anybody who's not born in Jersey might also have split loyalty? So does Deputy Gorst, who's our External Relations Minister, have divided loyalties because he's born in a different country? He's from the UK. And what if there was a tension between UK policy and Jersey policy? Where would his loyalty lie as a UK-born resident who's moved to Jersey? And of course, we heard yesterday that many members of our Assembly who are elected already had to, they declared an interest because they thought that they might be affected by their status would be changed because they've not been here 30 years, but they've been here 25 years. And I think rather than getting down that paranoid rabbit hole, sir, welcome back, is that I think we should actually be saying, the people who live in Jersey, can they help us find solutions to these big issues that we're facing? And I think the answer surely has to be yes, they could. I'm also picking up a vibe from the Assembly, sir, that members might wish to try and keep their head down on this kind of issue. But I think it is fundamental that members put something on record to say what their view is, because I think even if this debate doesn't succeed, and I hope it does succeed, because I think it's the direction of travel we need to be going in, members should say what they think. A lot of the arguments we've had about national security or about timeframes seem to be coming from those who actually don't want the system to change anyway. And I think we need to be arguing as to the merits of the proposition rather than any peripheral issues as to do with technical matters as to why it might not work. So ultimately, I think what we have to get back to is, are we an inclusive assembly? Are we trying to be an more inclusive assembly? And I would say to Deputy Scott, actually the other day when we were both watching indeed, and Deputy Miles was with us, the Lemoy school students, I don't remember they had to bring their passports with them when they stood and spoke in this assembly. We didn't suggest that the students who weren't necessarily of British nationality should be excluded from the proceedings, and they should maybe have to wait outside because they couldn't possibly ever become a states member until they were British citizens. We were simply respectful and accepted the fact that they all had something to bring to the debate and that their voices were equal. Why are we as adults any different? Where does when did it change? When do we apply different rules to adults and say that actually when you're an adult, we require a piece of paper to decide on whether or not what you're saying is valid? And the key difference here, of course, is that Deputy Owls has learned from my mistakes, I think. You know, I was perhaps a little bit like Einstein, trying to do the same thing over and over and getting the same result. It's not totally fair, I would say, because I always changed. I always had slightly different tweak to the proposal. But Deputy Owl's proposition here is much more positive in that it doesn't remove anything. So we don't stop being a British assembly. We don't stop being a Crown dependency by any of this. We're not removing the nationality requirement for British citizens. We're just simply saying that's one way to qualify. Another way to qualify is that if you've been in Jersey for an extensive period of time, then if you want to, you can stand for election. And I would put this, just maybe word of warning, is that we sometimes have a too important opinion of ourselves as an assembly, in the sense that, of course, what we do here is important. What the government does is important. But there are lots of jobs in Jersey that are at least equally important, or if not more important, which we don't exclude members from on the basis of their nationality. And so I think what I would like to hear from is that certainly those advocates who routinely stand up and advocate for minorities, whether it's women, children, trans groups, other affected minorities that live in the island, I would like to hear what these members have to say about what we maybe need to do to become more inclusive in our outlook, sir. So finally, so this is a technical point. I've been concerned in the past that we would seek to put a test requirement on anybody to stand for election where we ourselves don't have to pass a particular test. So what I would say is to the mover of the proposition is that if she were taking this in two parts, I might struggle with that second part. If she were to move it together, on balance, I would probably vote for the proposition, because I think the direction of travel here is getting to a point where we do want to be. And I think this can be delivered quite easily in time for the next election. And I think the positive message that we're not just here to talk about ourselves, but we're actually here to talk about the wider community and how we become more inclusive is a positive message which we could all be endorsing today if we want to. Thank you.
Deputy Scott, you have your light on. You've already spoken.
Yes, I wanted to ask the Solicitor General a question, please.
Does it arise out of what we've just been
Yes,
into?
it does, sir.
Very well. Yes, please do.
It relates to the discussion about the naturalisation, the actual inability of children that have been born in this island to have British citizenship. And so I just wondered, what is the law? How are the fees charged, and who is the minister responsible, please?
By fees, do you mean fees for naturalisation subsequently? Is that? I just didn't understand the question.
Currently, there is a requirement for a fee to be charged, sir, and I'm wondering whether there is scope in the law for different rates to be charged.
So, Deputy, just to be clear, a fee for what?
For naturalisation to be...
Right. So it's for someone to take British citizenship, you're asking the Solicitor General what the law says about charging, who is responsible for it, and is it correct that some children born in Jersey are not British citizens?
Yes, so, and would it require change of law? Could it be dealt with by regulations?
Solicitor, I assume you'd like some time to think about that?
I think some is an understatement. I'll probably need quite a bit of time. That's a lot of questions.
Very well. Deputy Jean.
Thank you, sir. And I'll keep this brief because it was I was prompted to say something after Deputy Gardner raised an issue, something, and also I'm glad to follow Deputy Tadier talking about the wider issue of why this is important to see how to bring people from all areas but who are wanting to be in Jersey and make Jersey their home to be able to do this job that I'm proud to do. So even though it may not be the most important job on the island, I'm proud because we are making important decisions. But the last debate we had, I raised the issue of the fact that for myself, I potentially could lose my British citizenship if I had wanted to become Dutch because of my husband and go and live in the Netherlands. So there is these rules where you actually lose your nationality, maybe not your loyalty, your nationality because of other rules of other countries. But actually, I also just wanted to, and I don't know the details, and I may be corrected by lawyers in the room, but my children were born outside of the UK. And so they have British citizenship only by descent, because I'm British. But their children, if their children are born outside of Jersey, outside of the UK, my grandchildren will not automatically be British. And it's called double descent. And I was looking at legal things here. I haven't really looked into it because, at the time it was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be, with my work was taking me to Brussels to do stuff for the EU, and that's where I wanted to have my children and raise them there. Also with my non-British husband. But then I felt the draw back to Jersey and to be hopefully end up being a public servant of Jersey. But my children still have the same situation. If they want to go out and explore the world and go and do exciting jobs around the world, their children will not be British.
I'm sorry, could we not have a conversation going on if you would just continue with your speech?
Thank you. I was getting distracted. So. And so if they came back to Jersey, and where the roots of our family are in Jersey, they wouldn't be able to in this situation, they wouldn't be able to stand and follow their grandmother and their great-great-grandfather in being an elected servant of Jersey. And so I'm supporting this because I think entitled status shows that you are in Jersey, that you have chosen Jersey as your roots. And I think that is loyalty, and that is more important than where you're born. Thank you.
Very much. Deputy Alex Curtis.
Thank you, sir. And the first thing that comes to mind on this is how do we as an Assembly broach these topics better in the future? How do members who are not raising a government proposition introduce these topics without what inevitably becomes a standoff nature of a debate where, frankly and realistically, most members here have made up their mind? And I say that because I've not made up my mind on this one, so I've been listening intently. And I just raised because I remember in the former debate we had on a similar proposition by Deputy Tadia, I said it was important for members to talk about this one and do stand up and share their views. And I have had the chance to go through Hansard and look at it. And I would like to first deal with the comments made by Deputy Scott. And the part that confused me and I think has been dealt with now is the words were originally used that members are only loyal to a nation. And I think it was clarified, thankfully, that there is a loyalty to a nation, but it wasn't that it was only one nation. And we do have dual nationals who, if we believe their citizenship has a lot of loyalty within it, would therefore be loyal to two places. And then the national security concerns, I'm actually relieved in rereading what the Minister for Sustainable Economic Development, Deputy Morell, talked about. And he said that Jersey is not privy to any military secrets. As far as he is aware, we do not have an army, we do not have a navy. And I think Deputy Tadia highlighted this. We've got to be realistic as to who we are and proportional. I note Deputy Josef's comments on the Venice Commission, echoing that of PPC, and I am now torn in that position. Do I feel I stick with the good governance procedures that I voted for and this Assembly didn't, or do I believe that this Assembly's created a pathway to pragmatism on this, where we have a view? I'm really confused. And then lastly, onto the proposition itself, sir. The criteria set here are pretty strict. They are pretty comprehensive, and I think as described by Deputy Alves, to meet the two criteria, to have permanent entitled status, and number two, to pass a knowledge of life citizenship test, one would meet, in most circumstances, a requirement to be a British citizenship. So the question is, if you go so far as parts 1 and 2, why would you not become a British citizen? And I'm left asking myself that, and of course there are two reasons. One, provided by the move of the proposition, is cost. One would hope, having passed a knowledge of life test and holding the permanent titled status, that somebody who got elected to this assembly would then feel empowered both through their mandate and, frankly, financially, to make that decision. They would have the prerequisites. And then it comes to option two. They cannot, even with the knowledge of life test and permanent entitled status, become a British citizen. And that is where Deputy Jean just spoke. So sometimes we would say this is such a high barrier, let's just keep it as it is. But there are two potentially valid reasons here why meeting a fairly equal position to the requirements, but obviously creating that differentiation, which was highlighted by many members in the previous debate, I think could cause merit, notwithstanding the concerns that we are not in a position to change Deputy Alves' wording on the timeline. I think that's what we've got to get to grips with, is those remaining two classes, is the cost a barrier, and fundamentally, would we really be worried if there were people who could not become British citizens because they may be a citizen of an ally of ours, but their nationality and their citizenship would require revoking. But notwithstanding that, they have decided to spend the time to learn about, to spend time to be here, to be permanent entitled, and learn the formal knowledge required to pass the knowledge of life citizenship test. And I would like to think that in those edge cases, which is what this deals with, it doesn't deal with people who've been here 5 years and would like to treat it as any other job and comes from any part of the world, that this is quite a safe one that deals with those edge cases discussed under previous amendments. I'd like to think that I will remain to hear from other members as I have been sitting on this one, thinking long and hard. And just for the avoidance of doubt, I know absolutely no one who is looking to fall into this or would benefit from this. If it's being asked, I know absolutely no one connected to this. I just am talking from what might benefit the island. Thank you, sir.
Deputy Morell.
Thank you, sir. And I start by apologising to members. I'm having real trouble with my hearing today, and I can't even hear myself properly. So if my volume goes all over the place, I apologise. I just want to say I have spoken in this sort of debate in the past, and I come from a place which is quite simply, I am more interested in somebody's views and sense of identity with regard to Jersey than I am with regard to the UK or Britain. And one of the reasons I say that, and I have to look to 2016 and the Brexit vote is a big part of that, but I'll just break it down. I know plenty of people from the UK who are British, who live in Jersey, who don't see Jersey as any different to the UK. They see Jersey as just part of Britain, as part of the UK. They see this assembly as no more than a local council. That perspective from a British citizen, and there are obviously British citizens who feel differently, but there are plenty of British citizens in Jersey who feel that way. That perspective, in my opinion, should rule them out from membership of the States Assembly, because I am far more interested in their views about Jersey and Jersey identity than I am in their views about Britain and British identity. And so for me, sir, whether somebody is born in Jersey, born in the UK, born in Portugal, Israel, wherever, if they have lived here for 10 years, if they have done the test as suggested in the proposition, that to me, and they are willing to do this job as well, because let's face it as well, there are both positives and negatives to doing this job, and it is a tough job. To me, that is more important, that they are focused on this island, believe that this island's identity is paramount when it comes to being in the States Assembly, and that the identity with regard to Jersey, effectively, in my view, should trump their identity with regard to Britain or not. Let's also then look at this in context. In 2016, the United Kingdom voted to leave the European Union, and it did so in a referendum which was in many parts xenophobic, in many parts aggressive against other European nationalities, and it sent out a massive statement to particularly European nationalities, other EU nationalities, that Britain wasn't interested in them. So if you are a Portuguese resident of Jersey for the last 20 years, or a Romanian resident of Jersey for the last 10 years or 15 years, you were told right there and then, Britain doesn't welcome you. Why would those people who have received and heard that message in 2016 and then all the way through, and it didn't just stop in 2016, the nastiness carried on all the way through 2020, 2021, it still carries on today. Why would you want to become a citizen of that nation which has told you it doesn't want you, it's not interested in you? Why would you want citizenship of that nation? That nation is pushing you away. Jersey, however, has a very different perspective. We welcome Europe. We are European. We welcome Europeans to work in Jersey. Without them, our society would not function. And so, again, I come back to, from my perspective, I'm far more interested in somebody's views on Jersey and their sense of a Jersey identity than I am about whether they are British or not. And somebody who is, for example, Portuguese, and has lived here for many, many years, can feel very Jersey, but feel not British at all. And I respect that entirely. And I would not want them to feel that they could not stand for the States, particularly when I know there are British people who do not see the States Assembly as worth anything at all. And it's for that reason, principally, that I do support this proposition, as I have done in the past. Because to latch on to this idea of British citizenship, I just think is anachronistic. Yes, the monarch is Jersey's monarch, but that's exactly my point. I see them, and I'm not saying everyone else does, but I see that monarch as Jersey's monarch. It is also the same monarch who happens to be the monarch of the United Kingdom. But to me, they are separate. They have two effectively different roles. And again, that is one reason why, for me, having British citizenship and sitting in this assembly is not the paramount requirement. I also think it's important to say there is an element of having to trust the electorate as well. And, you know, again, if someone is of a different nationality, they're Italian, they've lived in Jersey for 20 years, the electorate in their community knows them well and knows that they are committed to Jersey. Why shouldn't they be elected? If the electorate senses that they are somehow treacherous towards Jersey or have some sort of element of threat towards the island and Britain as well, by extension, my guess is the electorate won't vote them in. If a member, if an islander standing for election who, you know, lived all their life in Jersey, but shows very little interest in the local community, they're just standing for election, they tend to get thrown out by the electorate because they've not got depth of community links. And it could be the same for anyone of any other nationality, regardless of what that nationality is. If they have shown over years their links to the community, their desire to help their community, support the community they live in, there's every reason the electorate might return them to this assembly, regardless of whether or not they have a British citizenship. So my perspective, and the perspective I ask other members to look at, is the concept of your loyalty to Jersey, your sense of Jersey identity, and how you can have a very strong Jersey identity that does not automatically follow that your sense of Jersey identity means you have a sense of British identity. And it's that bit that really this proposition asks us to forgive. Forgive the fact that there are people who live here who don't feel British, but do feel very, very Jersey. Forgive that and allow them to sit in this assembly because they have a lot to give this island. Being British does not automatically mean you are not a security threat. There are plenty of security threats from British people. Being not British does not automatically mean you are an increased security threat. People are threats, or they are not threats. All those sorts of negative actions are just created by people, and people are people no matter where they come from in the world. If you speak to anyone who has travelled the world over, one thing that always comes back time and again, it's a cliche, is when you travel the world, you learn that people are all the same wherever they are. And we will say that. We've travelled and gone to different countries and said, wow, they're amazingly similar to us, even though their cultures are so very different. But we are humans. Human nature is what binds us all. So from my perspective, Jersey needs to be international, but Jersey needs to have a sense of itself. And the types of people I would like to see sitting in this assembly are people who believe in Jersey having a sense of itself and buy into that sense of Jersey's self. Being British is, in my view, something at a tangent. And being British does not guarantee that you believe in Jersey's identity. Being British does not mean at all that you see Jersey as separate from the United Kingdom. And again, I'm more interested in states members who do see Jersey as separate from the United Kingdom. So, sir, those are the reasons that I'll be supporting this proposition.
Deputy Scott, is it a point
Yes.
of clarification?
Yes, if the Minister would let me.
Do you give way for a point of clarification? Yes, very well.
Yes, just because members may be confused, given that I have been delegated the cybersecurity portfolio from the Minister's speech, I just wanted to clarify, does he recognise that the Jersey government officers have a relationship with the National Cybersecurity Centre in the UK, and perhaps others do with other security intelligence centres in the UK, and that therefore, in terms of the way forward and allowing, and of course there can be paranoia about Russia sleeping agents, I agree.
This is turning into a second
Sorry,
speech.
does he,
Deputy, it really has
does
to
he
be-
recognise this, and how does he square this?
No, it's not asking
Oh.
for how does he square. You're clarifying from
Does
the
he rec-
previous speaker what the previous speaker meant when he said certain things. That's a point of clarification.
Right. So when he meant that it's important to recognise other nationalities, to whoever they are, and in Jersey, and would that extend even to people who have been resident in countries that our UK constitutional partner in matters of cybersecurity and others recognise as hostile states?
I can clarify that I do recognise that officers in Jersey government work with the National Security Council and other elements of the UK government, but not all officers in Jersey's government, indeed not all officers in our digital policy team, are British citizens, I believe. I believe we have officers operating in that area who are not British citizens. So I do recognise that, but I also understand that being an officer in Jersey's government does not have a requirement to be a British citizen.
Didn't quite
Well,
answer the question about...
Nonetheless, Deputy, that's as far as we're going with points of clarification. Mr. Solicitor, are you now in a position to advise the Assembly?
Yes, I'll do my best. Deputy Scott asked a number of questions. Is a fee payable for naturalisation? The answer is yes. The fee from time to time is set by ministerial order made pursuant to the Immigration Act as extended to Jersey. The minister responsible is the Home Affairs Minister. Presumably, having been set by ministerial order, the fee payable from time to time can be changed by ministerial order. The other question was whether it was correct that some children cannot become naturalised British citizens as opposed to citizens by birth. The answer to that must be that if a person meets the criteria for British citizenship through naturalisation, all things being equal, they would be entitled to apply for it and obtain it. I hope that's helpful.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Mezek.
Thank you, sir. I very much enjoyed listening to Deputy Morell's speech just before he goes. I think he made some really good points there. I don't necessarily see eye to eye with him on every element of my Jersey identity, and that's the nature of being a Jersey person, is that we have different aspects of our identity and things that matter to us, but I think he encapsulated much of that very well. So there's been some commentary about how many times this issue has come up
in states debates. And in response to that, I would say, sir, that the arc of history is long, but it curves towards justice. We may well have, sir, senators and congressmen who stand in the doorway and block up the halls, but the times they are changing, and one day we will be in a situation where this strange restriction on who can put themselves forward to be judged through our democratic process will be done away with, and will be all the better for that. And those of us who believe that that is in Jersey's interests are not going to go quietly, and we'll keep bringing it up until we have that justice, sir. And we may face setbacks from time to time, but you don't just give up on what you believe in, especially when you consider it in the interests of the people who you represent. So just addressing points that were made from other speakers, I won't dwell on this one too much, but Deputy Scott expressed her surprise that the issue of national security hadn't been dealt with in the proposition, and the reason for that's very simple, sir. It's because it's irrelevant. It is not a due consideration, and it is based on all sorts of assumptions that, frankly, are absurd. One's loyalty to their community is not determined by what piece of paper they have or how they acquired it, sir. So I'm guessing around 80 million people in this world possess a British passport. I never asked for it. I didn't apply for it. I did nothing to deserve it, apart from the fact, sir, that my parents happened to be in Jersey when I was born. It is not a demonstration of anything about what's in my heart to either the United Kingdom or to Jersey. What's in my heart is there for completely separate reasons, and that's where my loyalty to Jersey comes from. It's also, sir, an absurdity to suggest that of those 80 million or so British citizens, 99 point whatever % of which have nothing to do with Jersey, are somehow more loyal to Jersey and its security than people who have come from other places who aren't British citizens that have been here so long. So I know that repetition is against standing orders, but I believe that's within a debate and not against repeating points I've made in previous debates. So apologies for using this analogy again, but I think it's useful because it shows how absurd our rules are. But under our rules, sir, a person can move to Jersey from Pitcairn Island, as far away from Jersey as it's possible to be without going into outer space, come here, loll about for a few years, do nothing, and they get the right to run for election on a presumption that they're more loyal to Jersey than somebody who came here from Madeira at 6 months old, lived here for decades, contributed, volunteered, has known no other home apart from Jersey, and somehow there's a shadow hanging over them suggesting that they're not loyal. I'll call that what I find it, sir. I find that notion offensive, because I know many people in our community who love this island as much as I do, and the fact they don't possess a British passport is nothing to do with it, sir. And, sir, of course, it is no guarantee of any kind of loyalty or protection on a national security basis, because British citizens, like citizens of any place, are capable of becoming traitors. And short of that, sir, anyone is capable, inadvertently perhaps, of being a useful idiot and simply inadvertently saying or doing things that are against national security, even if it's not their intention. And possessing a British passport has no impact on that whatsoever. That's why, so I think that the compromise proposed by Deputy Alves, which does provide some, I think far more tangible test of loyalty, to say that you have stuck it out in the island for a period of time, is far greater than spending £1,000 to acquire a document that pledges your loyalty to another country. Because Jersey is British, but Britain isn't Jersey. And you can't run for the Assembly unless you pay £1,000 to pledge your loyalty to the United Kingdom is absurd. And of course, it's a matter of great embarrassment to us that our neighbours in Guernsey are well ahead of us on this in realising it. So on the comments from PPC, which I find very surprising, I have studied the Venice Commission for about 12 years now. It's a matter of great interest to me. I've considered it in all sorts of debates in here, and I'm surprised that it's portrayed as having some kind of relevance in this, given that the impact it has on the voting system is nothing. It has no impact whatsoever about how our polling stations work, what our constituency boundaries are, where somebody goes to register and then cast their ballot paper. The only thing it does, sir, is have an impact on who might choose to come forward and therefore end up on a ballot paper. Your experience as a voter is not affected by this, apart from your choice of candidates, and there are a whole load of things that determine what your choice of candidate is. So I mean, I'm astounded that a link is being drawn to that commission when it is clearly more in line with the material things that affect a voter's experience in the system, how it's constructed and how they engage with it, not what names might end up on a ballot paper. You know, people drop out of elections, people appear in elections at the last minute. No one's going to suggest that that is somehow providing instability or uncertainty in an election process. So I really think that it's misjudged of PPC to draw that connection, because they're clearly not connected in the way that it materially was when we debated P2. So I hope that Deputy Alves, having considered a way forward following the previous debate, can bring some members on side now who might have expressed reservations previously to find this as a decent middle ground that helps move us forward. But so we can make no apologies that if it doesn't go through, it is not going to be a matter upon which people just become silent, because we know that there are people in our community who love Jersey as much as we do, who have every right to take part in our democratic processes, who, let's not forget, sir, have the right to vote, although that's been brought up to be questioned in a previous debate, quite wrongly, in my view. These people have the right to vote in Jersey, but not the right to stand for election. That's a disconnect, sir, that ought to be corrected. It will be corrected one day, and we will keep fighting for it, sir, because that is the just thing to do.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Kovac.
Thank you, sir. Jersey has long been a welcoming, outward-looking community, thriving through the talents and contributions of both locals and those who have chosen to make it their home. Our island's values of inclusivity and fairness have already been reflected in key changes over the years, such as extending jury service, voting rights, and the right to serve in the States of Jersey Police to non-British nationals. Today, we have an opportunity again to build on this progress by ensuring our democracy is more inclusive and truly representative of all those who call Jersey home. This proposal isn't about nationality. It's about commitment, experience, and vision for Jersey's future. Many non-British residents have contributed years of service to our island, and their ties to Jersey are deep. They are part of our community, and they should not be excluded from the political process simply because they are not British citizens. We must ask ourselves, does loyalty to Jersey require British citizenship? After all, there are British citizens who have lived here for a short time, yet people who have dedicated decades to Jersey are denied the opportunity to represent it in the State's Assembly. That is simply not right. Our identity as a community is not defined by nationality, but by shared values and a commitment to our island's future. Spanish, Indian nationals, and after Brexit, few others cannot have dual nationality as British. I have heard similarly from a lady that came at the Vodaji event on International Women's Day. She has lived in Jersey for over 25 years, is deeply committed to this island, and wished to stand for election. However, she cannot do so because she is unable to hold dual nationality, and due to the context of Brexit, she cannot give up her citizenship, which is vital to her. Should we deny someone the right to stand for election just because she cannot afford the costly and lengthy process of naturalization, or because of dual citizenship restrictions? Of course not. Similarly, I ask you to consider the example of someone from the British Virgin Islands, a British national from the other side of the globe, who can move to Jersey and after only 2 years can stand for election. Does this person have a greater loyalty to Jersey than someone who has lived here for 10, 20, or even 30 years building their life, their family, and their career? Or does my British passport, along with the Romanian one, make me dedicating myself any different to helping people in Jersey? For sure not. It's not about nationality, it's about dedication to Jersey. Additionally, the financial burden of the naturalization process, costing actually up to $2,000 and takes up to 1 year to obtain, is out of reach for many residents. This, along with the barriers that some nationals face in being unable to hold dual citizenship, makes it unfair to require non-British residents to become British citizens just to stand for election. Why should someone with deep ties to Jersey be excluded from the political process because of such financial or legal burdens? This proposition is about fairness, inclusivity, and reflecting Jersey's diverse population in our governance. It empowers residents who have shown dedication to Jersey to have a voice in the decision-making process that affects us all. We must trust the electorate to decide who is best suited to serve our island, and if candidate is not fit, the people of Jersey will have the final say at the ballot box. Let us take this step towards a more inclusive and representative Jersey, and I ask you to support this proposition and move forward with a policy that aligns with our island's values of inclusion, fairness, and forward-thinking governance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Course.
Thank you, sir. I know that members won't thank me for continuing the debate, so I'll endeavour to be brief. This is an issue which has arisen many times, and we've heard similar passionate contributions. I, for one, have not been convinced by those passionate contributions, but I do think there are issues which would warrant further review by PPC, because they're not straightforwardly resolved. There ought to be a reasonably high barrier to standing for election. That is not anti-democratic, it's about democratic standards. And if we look elsewhere, the barriers that most countries have in place are far higher than the barriers that we already have in place. And yet on the back of this proposition, without that appropriate work being undertaken by PPC, we would be reducing them and not understand what that would mean in a wider context. Because how do we analyse commitment, which really is what members have been talking about? And I don't think we've come up with a process or proposal that properly allows us to analyse what commitment is to this community that we are all privileged to be a part of and privileged to call our home from wherever we have hailed. Whether we like it or not, sir, we are, if one is born in Jersey, one is a British citizen. We've heard some views around what that citizenship means or what it doesn't mean. And therefore, I think that it would be wrong of us to support this today and just to make that decision based on some passionate speeches. It is rather better to do what I think PPC have said, is that they don't currently have the time to do this. They do have some, despite what Deputy Mesek said, they do have some concerns around compliance with the Venice Convention, and therefore it's better for them to do that work and come back to the Assembly when they have spoken to members of the community, when they've done a proper analysis of what other jurisdictions, countries and islands do, and then we are able to make an informed position. Because it is true, being a British citizen doesn't mean one is automatically absolutely committed to the country in which one lives, whether that's Jersey or it's a part of the United Kingdom. Nor does it automatically mean that one is not committed either. And being resident for 25 or 30 years, nor does that mean one is automatically committed or not, or passing the test, nor does that mean one is automatically committed or not. So in the spirit of Deputy Mezek's speech, that this issue isn't going away, because he sees it as a matter of fairness, I think he said, then the only correct approach must be to vote against this proposal and then to ask PPC to undertake that work, which is very necessary. So we've got facts upon which then to base our decision, and members can bring this decision back in light of all of that evidence. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Deputy Binet.
I'll be extremely brief. I hadn't intended to speak on this at all, and I'm very grateful to Deputy Gorst for getting up and saying what he's just said. What's become clear from this morning's debate is that the situation that we've got at the moment is far from ideal. Antiquated and out of date. We definitely need to do something different. I'm going to vote against today, but not because I'm against it in principle. I'd like the thing looked at properly and a properly defined Jersey solution put together, so they can come back here and we can vote on something that's been given really good consideration. But I certainly think there's been some very, very good points made towards this today, and I look forward to that coming back where we can take another vote, hopefully. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Howell.
Thank you, sir. I thank Deputy Gorst and Deputy Binet, and I'd also like to say that perhaps we could look at how much it does cost to become a British citizen. That might be part of the work. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? If no other member wishes to speak. Deputy Dublé.
Thank you, sir. Just very briefly, what I wanted to remind members is that we are gatekeepers to our Parliament, and quite often members of the public who are interested in standing for election will come to us and request advice and support. And I just wanted members, before they cast their votes, to picture somebody like that actually standing before them, because I think it's quite theoretical and abstract when we're discussing it. But actually there will be members of the public out there who have perhaps lived here for more than 20 years, 25 years, and want to take part. And what we're saying, if we disallow that, is you don't belong here, because this is actually a proposition about belonging. And I think there's inconsistencies in whether people can vote or not. And if you can vote, I think you should be able to stand for election, actually. I think if you should either be democratically eligible or not. I would just like members just to picture an actual person who has made their life here in Jersey actually standing in front of them and asking for support and belonging, and whether you would actually be able to say you belong here or you don't belong here. And I think that should guide members in how they vote.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? If no other member wishes to speak, I close the debate and call upon Deputy Alves to respond.
Thank you, sir, and I thank all members for their contributions to this debate. I'd like to start by just mentioning, Deputy Morell mentioned 10 years, so I just wanted to highlight that permanent entitled status is currently 30 years. Obviously, that's come down to 25. Some members may still have this sheet on their desk, which outlines that if you have come to the island as a child, there are some other kind of provisions that enable you to become permanent entitled as a child. But I'd like to also thank Deputy Morell for his supportive comments. I'm going to start by just addressing the Deputy Gorst and Deputy Tom Binney, actually, which I found quite disappointing and almost a double standard, to be honest, because both of these deputies have asked for PPC to do the work, things to be looked at properly. They've asked for facts and evidence to base the decision on. So this was done for the Senators' debate, and I spent a good chunk of my first term doing a lot of evidence gathering and number crunching. But these deputies decided that they would vote against all of that evidence and all of that fact, and actually vote in favour of something that decreased voter equality. So it does feel like it's a bit of a double standard, sir. Deputy Scott, with regard to the national security risks, I know that a number of members have already addressed this, but I would like to add that if there were concerns about national risk, that the naturalisation process should include a national security risk assessment or steps to minimise that. And this proposition is asking those that meet that criteria already to be able to stand without having to go through the cost of naturalisation. There's been a lot of talk around loyalty, and I won't cover the points that say that having a passport obviously does not necessarily equal national loyalty. I think the points raised by Deputy Tadia on that covered it. And to make the point that I do have 2 passports, and I know that there are other people in this assembly that have 2 or more passports. And I actually know of people in the community who have 4 different passports, as they've lived in a number of different countries. So is it not possible to be loyal to more than one thing? I know that I have multiple loyalties with multiple friends and families, for example, friends and family members, for example. And I'd like to just highlight the points and thank Deputy Gardner about her points about loyalty and identity and connection. I think she covered that really well, and I couldn't have put it better myself. Deputy Scott also raised concerns regarding us as members having access to information. Well, sir, even as elected members, we do not have full access to government systems and to access to our islanders' details, I think, which is actually much to some of our constituents' surprise, actually. Because a lot of the time when I'm contacted by constituents, they assume that I can just log into the computer system and bring up their social security or what, all of those things, income tax. But actually we need to get signed consent every time in order to discuss anything to do with our constituents. So the Constable of St Brellard's raised background checks, and I think Deputy Gardner touched on this. Criminal records check is required as part of the naturalisation checks, but we currently have exclusions in our elections law regarding those who have committed certain crimes not being eligible to stand. So that already is part of our election law. There are already restrictions with that. There was also a number of members that mentioned, obviously, the Venice Commission, and that this was contrary to the position that PPC took on the senators. I'd just like to re-quote the quote that was in the PPC comments, which says, election legislation should be enacted sufficiently far in advance of an election date. Far in advance, sir. It doesn't actually explicitly say 12 months, although obviously that would be best practice. But as stated before, this Assembly has already accepted that they are happy to play around with that 12-month deadline by accepting a previous proposition. And like I stated in my opening speech, and was covered by Deputy Mezek's contributions, this isn't a radical change to our electoral system. It doesn't affect the composition of our electoral districts or have any effect on the method of voting. And again, I thank Deputy Gardner for her comments reminding members what has been previously stated about legislative drafting capacity. So Deputy Ozef made some points around allowing non-British citizens, and I just want to remind members that there was a time when police officers had to have a British citizenship, and we made changes to allow those without British citizenship to serve as officers, which also included changing things like the oath that they took in court. This was also the case for those working in social security, I believe, and some of the income tax officers as well. And I also thank Deputy Jean for highlighting some of the complexities around nationality. Deputy Yosef also mentioned something about needing to be relevant. Well, so we live in an island that we know has the lowest voter turnout in the OECD countries. One of the reasons that has been cited before, and I'm going to quote the Jersey Opinions and Lifestyle Survey report from 2022 again, is around the public feeling like they don't have candidates that they can relate to. This has been cited in multiple focus groups as well, and that may be a way to encourage them, which are actually to have role models that they can relate to. So if I go back to that Joel's survey of 2022, 17% said nobody I wanted to vote for was one of the reasons that they didn't vote in the 2022 election, compared to 3% who said loss of island-wide senator role. As mentioned by a number of speakers, there is no such thing as Jersey citizenship. So, sir, in closing, by extending the eligibility criteria, we are not automatically voting people in this assembly, into the assembly. We're actually giving the public the choice. We're giving the public more choice. But not only are we extending the choice for the public, we're also sending out a clear message about how we value those who have committed so much of their lives to this island, and that we trust the public's choice and voice. Because after all, I think we need to remember that none of us would be here without putting our trust in the public. So, sir, I urge members to vote in favour of this proposition, and I call for the appel. Thank you.
That is called for. I invite members to return to their seats. And I ask the greffier to open the voting. If members have had the opportunity of casting their vote, then I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition has been defeated. 18 votes pour, 24 votes contre, 1 abstention.
We have both, please, sir.
Those members voting pour the Connaught Harbour Centralia and Deputies Southern, Morell, Rob Ward, Alves, Gardner, Mesick, Coles, Porray, Catherine Curtis, Feltham, Jern, Kovac, Alex Curtis, Tadier, Stevenson, Moore and Doublé. Those members voting contre, the Connaught Harbour St Brelard, Trinity, St John, Grouville, St Juan, St Mary and St Saviour, and Deputies Labby, Luce, Ayer, Gorst, Farnham, Osoph, War, Miles, Scott, Rose Binet, Miller, Howell, Tom Binet, Ferry, Barbara Ward, Wilson and Andrews, and the Connaught Harbour St Martin abstained.
Well, the final item of public business is the regulation of professional practice of therapeutic counsellors, P.21, lodged by Deputy Coles. The main respondent will be the Minister for Health and Social Services, and I ask the greffier to read that proposition.
The States are asked to decide whether they are of opinion to request the Minister for Health and Social Services to include, as part of his legislative programme for 2025, the regulation of the professional practice of therapeutic counsellors, including requiring registration with a governing body and subsequently the Jersey Care Commission, to ensure they meet a minimum standard of qualifications, and to present the legislative requirements to the Assembly no later than January 2026.
Deputy.
Thank you, sir. I'll start by acknowledging the potential conflict of, well, it's not a conflict of interest, but the fact that my wife is a counsellor in Jersey. It is declared on my declaration of interest, which is available on the State Assembly website. There is no financial benefit or risk either way for this amendment, amendment proposition, in whichever way it goes. So I will start by thanking Deputy Luce, because he was the first person I engaged within the ministerial team with this, because regulation normally sits with the Minister of the Environment. We had a short discussion where there was I highlighted the issue. We didn't have a full conversation about remedies and rectifications, but it was his officers who then directed me to the Health Minister, that pointed that this was part of his legislative programme, as there was work ongoing in regards to psychotherapists, and this piece of work would fit within that section. So that's why the proposition is directed towards the Health Minister. I would like to thank the Minister for taking time to meet with me and to discuss. I think the conversation was good, it was healthy. I think we both realise there are risks, and as that is also mentioned in this comments paper, that there are risks, but we clearly did not agree on the methodology to how we fix that risk. One of the reasons the Minister said is the worry about red tape. And so I sometimes find that this argument of red tape is quite a difficult one, because some things do require regulation, and they do require work to be done to make sure that people are safe. And this to me is where this comes from, is that at the moment, people who are calling themselves counsellors don't need any formal qualification. And that's what worries me, because there is no protected title, there is no protected status for anybody being considered a therapeutic counsellor. And so I have heard that there are people talking in the Assembly again, and I'm finding it distracting. I do, if they don't mind.
Very well.
So I'll try and find my place again, please. Sorry, do excuse me. So I suppose the point I should start with is raising is why do I think this is necessary, or why I think it's necessary now. We have entered a time where there is more awareness around mental health, and that mental health isn't just mental illness. That there is a difference between suffering with poor mental health and having a serious mental illness. Since COVID, sir, I think a lot of people have been able to reflect on their own experiences of life and how it affects them day to day, especially as we left this closed-off bubble where we were trapped away from everybody and then put back into what we considered the new normal for a long time. And that created a lot of different feelings and different emotions within people. And people were wondering why actually they felt so comfortable in being separated from everyone, but then felt really overwhelmed by being put back in front of everybody. And with an acceptance that mental health is more than just the absence of mental illness, that people started to question that. People started to probe into what that meant for them. And so this is where they started to seek help, and they started to seek advice and guidance. And this is where people wouldn't necessarily think, well, I'm not unwell. I'm not necessarily needing to go speak to a psychologist. I'm not necessarily needing to speak to a psychiatrist. I just need somebody to help me understand what is happening to myself in the here and now. And of course, when you start to look at things like psychotherapy and counselling, and I do tie the two things in together, so and it will become more apparent when I start talking about the governing bodies, because most of the governing bodies cover psychotherapists and counsellors. Most counsellors and psychotherapists would argue that they basically do the same job, but they come from it from different aspects. A psychotherapist might look what they class as systemically. They'll look at your life as a whole. They'll look at your past, and they'll look at everything, and they'll try and build up you from there, where a counsellor will look at what's happening with you in the here and now and sort of work it through, and might work backwards to where it all started from. There's also different theories of counselling practice, from psychodynamic to integrative to person-centred. And when you start going into all these different crossovers of different types of therapy, so it is actually quite a minefield of theories and thesis. So, sir, when people start looking into the private sector, and people are starting to use titles that are known for delivering certain services, there is a certain element of trust that we put into people who are using these names and these titles. And I'll mention that a psychotherapist has to register with the Jersey Care Commission at the moment. That is defined within the care law, and so therefore they have to register. But a counsellor is not defined within that, sir, and therefore there is no protection against that title. We're also seeing, sir, that there are two colleges in Jersey who are running courses which that teach counselling skills, Highlands College and the Tara Centre, both of which use the same awarding body for their qualifications, the CPCAB. I am going to apologise now, there are a lot of acronyms within this, because they do use it, and they do get very confusing. So, sir, with these colleges providing counselling skills, and there are varying levels of skills that you can develop. Most people start with a level 2, provided they've had a significant qualification. GCSEs is normally enough to qualify to move straight on to a level 2, sir. Level 3 will give you a more more deeper understanding of the methodologies of counselling. But it's level 4, sir, where you reach, which gives you the what they consider the absolute base level of qualification to be able to call yourself a counsellor. Most of the centres and governing bodies and trainers will always recommend that people should do a level 5 if they want to work independently away from a clinic. This is why, sir, we'll see that the requirement for a school counsellor in our schools is a level 4 qualification registered with the CPCAB. So, sir, potentially, between Highlands College and the Tara Centre, we could be producing anywhere between 10 and 20 newly qualified counsellors every year vying for our market. Now, sir, I became aware of the situation, of some issues and situations because of social media algorithms. For those who don't know how these algorithms work, you start clicking or going onto certain pages to see what they do. You start to see more of it because the social media platforms say, oh, this is something you're interested in. Here's more of these things that you're interested in within your local area. And so, sir, when my wife was doing a little bit of advertising, she asked me to click like on her posts just so it reaches a wider audience, again, for the algorithms and things like that. And I think, yeah, that's okay, it's my personal one, nothing to do with my political side, so I'll just click like, that's fine. But of course, then I started seeing the adverts. And this is where my concerns started getting raised because, as I said, my wife is a qualified counsellor. She knows what the basics are, what's supposed to be done for this, that, and the other. And I started to see people advertising things like family therapy, relationship therapy, and most alarming, sir, children therapy. Now, sir, the base level 4 qualification is targeted at individuals of adult age, not children. They provide a counselling service that arrives at a single point of focus. You do not have a single point of focus within a family or a relationship. The level 4 qualification does not cover this. So, sir, where do I complain to have this person stop advertising this? Well, sir, there isn't anywhere, because there's actually nothing stopping them from doing this. There is nothing saying that people cannot offer a service. They have a qualification in counselling, although there is nothing to actually prove that qualification is valid and they actually hold it, because there is no place for them to register. That goes on trust. And sir, when we look at some other industries within this island, trust is fine. You have a reputation as a good plumber, you'll recommend you to a friend, oh, he's a great plumber, you can go work with him, he's a good plumber. Works for a company, oh, what insurance certificates do you have? Oh, we've got this insurance certificate, it's fine, because that's plumbing. We're talking about working with people's minds. And what really concerns me, sir, is we're working with vulnerable people, vulnerable children, and sir, it is not acknowledged because they don't have to register with the Care Commission that they are actually working with vulnerable people. Because if they were registered with the Care Commission, they would be able to get a DBS check, something that is required for anybody else working with children, but is not required here because there is absolutely no requirement to say that you're qualified as a counsellor, that you're able to carry out these services, sir. And that is very, very worrying for me, sir. So, the essence of my proposition, sir, is that everybody who wishes to call themselves a counsellor will be obligated to join one of the main governing bodies within the UK. So there is a number of groups that are confirmed, I think confirms the right answer, the right word, sir, with the PSA, another acronym, Professional Services Authority, which govern the regulation of regulatory bodies like the BACP, British, yes, it is another one, the British Association of Counsellors and Psychotherapists, the UKCP, the United Kingdom, again, another acronym, there are a load, they are mentioned in my report, they are also mentioned in the Minister's comments paper, sir. Because these governing bodies have requirements for membership. You have to prove your membership to them. Now, there are many ways you can qualify as a counsellor. It doesn't have to be the CPCAB level 4. There are degree courses you can take and varying other ways to become a qualified counsellor. And these governing bodies know this. These are the governing bodies. They will then check, you meet our standards, you can become part of our body. And so therefore, they will then say to the Jersey Care Commission that yes, they have met the, I say, they won't actually, there's no need for them to actually directly communicate, that once you get that membership of that body, it proves that you are qualified as a base level counsellor, at minimum. So therefore, you have a base level of training and a base level of competency. These groups also, these governing bodies also have complaints processes, which means if somebody, like myself, seeing these people advertising things that I don't believe they are qualified, because they're certainly not advertising any additional qualifications to say why they're qualified to work with children's families or in relationships, that I can raise a complaint with them to these governing bodies. These governing bodies will then investigate, and if they think they are degrading or degrading that group's reputation, they will remove their membership. It is within their prerogative to do so, sir. Because people should be committed to the ethical standards that they sign up to within these governing bodies. They hold ethical standards, which means that if you wish to practice as a counsellor, that is what your minimum target of your ethics should be doing. The idea, sir, is I didn't want to prescribe which governing body people should belong to, because so many of these governing bodies, some of them have more special interest in the variations of therapists. I also don't think it's right to say we support and favour one governing body over another when there are others available. But sir, that does leave some problems, because even myself as somebody who I consider myself moderately competent in IT and the internet, sir, when I went looking for some of these people's registration numbers and details, it was actually quite taxing to find. They're not necessarily that easy to do so. It took me a couple of tries on one particular governing body, and I did find the bit, because they have this really nice section where people pay to have a nice promoted advert with their picture, their address and things like that. But I believe that does cost quite a bit of money a year, sir. And then there's another section where it's just the name and confirmation of their membership level and status. And so that's why I then thought, well, you know what, the Jersey Care Commission is our local centre of our regulator. They're the people who make sure and hold all these details of people who are registered as a central database. So people wouldn't have to figure out, oh, if I go to them, which is their governing body, where do I find that governing body? Where then do I have to find them to make sure they are still registered with that governing body? Because the JCC, the Jersey Care Commission, sir, already holds this information for other practices on the island. The only difference that I'm suggesting, sir, within this proposition is actually that councillors would be required to maintain that membership of the governing body. If they do lose that, then they would no longer be able to be registered with the JCC. At the moment, the JCC have a couple of, again, these are mentioned in my report, and I do apologise for those who have read the report thoroughly that I'm repeating what is in there. But there's a number of different practitioners in there that are, they just register, they don't have to prove that they're a member of a governing body. One being psychotherapists, another being clinical psychologists, sir, and another one being chiropractors. So since I've lodged this proposition way back in the beginning of March, I've been contacted by a number of psychotherapists telling me that this is a really, really good idea, and counsellors, well, not just psychotherapists and counsellors, telling me that this is something that really, really needs to be done, and it is a really, really important thing to be done. And when I've asked the psychotherapists especially, I said, well, how did you get registered with the JCC? What's your process that you go through? So, well, we join the governing body, one of the ones that I've already mentioned. They provide me with a membership number. I give that membership number to the Jersey Care Commission. That confirms that I'm qualified to do the role that I am being registered for. They register me on the system. But once that happens, there is nothing else. They don't follow back up. They don't have to keep that membership. They can supply it every time they have to re-register with the JCC, and so that number will stay on the Care Commission's website. But sir, when I look at the other groups that are in that, and I am going to specifically name the chiropractors, not the chiropractor in question, there is at least 4 chiropractors on there that no longer have a registration body. they've just chosen, for whatever reason, not to maintain membership to that body. And there is one particular chiropractor on there who has been deregistered. Now, I don't know what that means in the terms of deregistered. Does that mean that her governing body has struck her off, or them off, sorry, I should say? So what's happened there? I don't know, but they're still on the Care Commission's website. So my idea about making sure that they have to maintain the membership with the governing body means that if something happens, they would no longer be on that register, sir. So people will know that if they go to the Care Commission's website and they see that a person is not there as a registered counsellor, a therapeutic counsellor, that maybe there is something untoward happening. So I'm aware I last glanced across and saw Deputy Barbara Ward sitting there, who was very much instrumental in the title of nurse becoming a protected title in Jersey. And I think it's important to highlight that this kind of work is important because people in these professions hold a level of trust, and their skills should be held as accountable. That if they make mistakes, that there's a review process. Everybody does make mistakes, so that is true. And there has to be a way to review and make sure that this is not a systemic problem or somebody who is manipulating or doing dangerous acts or acting inappropriately, sir. But at the moment, there is absolutely no line of accountability for anybody calling themselves a counsellor. And these are people who are helping people through mental health. Now, so I'm going to take some. It's my introduction, and I don't know which way the debate's going to go. And rather than leaving it all to the end, because we might be at the end of another long day, but I was going to go through some of the Health Minister's comments paper as part of this. One of the I'm trying to find the line now. Sorry, I do apologise. So put the second line of the Minister's, the second paragraph of the Minister's comments papers said that there is little evidence to suggest that we need to apply much needed resources and detailed work and engagement that would be required to assess the risk to islanders posed by uncredited counsellors. So the accreditation is a high level of requirement from these governing bodies. It's not the base intro. The accreditation does take a lot more work. It does require people to commit to longer hours of supervision, CPD, and I absolutely agree that people should be aspiring to accreditation rather than just coming in at the base level. But the part about the resources and detailed work, well, like I said, it's part of the Minister's legislative programme already to deal in the area of psychotherapists. So this is actually tying into that level of work. Work is already happening there. I'm not committing more time and more resources to it because that work was already being done. Otherwise, this debate would still be targeted at the Minister for the Environment rather than the Minister for Health. So I'm trying to find the line, so I do apologise, unfortunately. I may have overburdened myself in my time frame between the last debate and this one. There was a line within the comments paper about there being that Jersey accepts a level, like the UK, that Jersey accepts a level of risk without regulating counsellors. So my question to members on that front is, are you happy with the level of risk? So there it is. It's under the evidence against local regulation, paragraph 5. I have to say it like that, sir, because the numbering changes up and down the comments paper. But it said, like the UK, the position in Jersey accepts a level of risk to people seeking counselling services. Sir, I am not happy with this level of risk. We have more people going through more emotional and mental health crises on the island as life gets harder for many people. We're going through a cost of living crisis. People are stressed with work. There's anxiety. People are becoming more aware of the effects of their mental health on their physical state, sir. And so, sir, I am no longer in a position where I feel comfortable that I can accept that level of risk. And I think we need to find ways to mitigate that risk. And so this is why I'm asking for this proposition for the members to support me on this. It also mentions there is currently no data available about complaints made. Well, that's clear because there's nowhere to complain to. Can't complain to the Jersey Care Commission because they don't handle this subject. It's not theirs. Now, if we're having somebody who then goes through a mental health crisis, at what point is anybody in helping that individual going to stop and say, well, which counsellor did you see? Did you check that they were accredited first? You know, how do you gather this evidence? So I know some members have spoken to me about, obviously there's probably a need to regulate, or to at least look at the regulation of people who inject cosmetic procedures into people's faces and other parts of the body, because again, this is an area that's not regulated over here, and there could be quite dramatic health impacts to that. But so if an incident like that occurred, they'd end up in hospital. There would be something that would be more recorded and more physically able to see, so we'd be able to monitor that in a different way. And so, again, it's on my declaration. My wife is also an acupuncturist, and so she sticks needles into people for a living. In fact, she tells people quite regularly she enjoys stabbing me in the back on a regular basis. And so there's a risk with people who are not properly qualified, or as qualified as some, when they come to needling, especially over areas of the lungs. I mean, there was a case that comes to mind of an Olympic athlete in the UK who suffered a pneumothorax because somebody punctured a lung. It wasn't an acupuncturist, it was a physio who had done a supplementary course and training, and then saying they're an acupuncturist, but actually they're doing something called dry needling. But when we talk about complexity of new regulation, I think that one would be very complex to start, because nothing exists of it at all at the moment. Where this work is going on around psychotherapists, and as I've said earlier, the governing bodies all cover psychotherapists and counsellors because their work is so similar. So I am quite pleased that the Minister in its comments paper as well talks about doing a campaign to highlight the importance of making sure that they speak to somebody who is qualified and somebody who is accredited and all sorts of things. I'm willing to spend up to £5,000 to do so, sir. But again, as I just highlighted with needling and injections, there are so many other unregulated processes, therapists, cosmetics, that happen on this island. Why, just because I've raised this about one aspect, why this would only be covering psychotherapists. There's so much more that we should be having a continuous awareness campaign about the risks of using people who are not regulated, people who are not members of governing bodies, people who are not covered, expose what we don't control. Because so this is about health. This is about people's health and well-being. This is about putting levels of trust into individuals to support our islanders' health and well-being. And who has to pick up the pieces when these people fail? If they've gone into private practice, they'll spend money. Then who else comes back in to have to pick up the pieces once these people have been failed and let down? It's the other taxpayers. It's all of our money again, because we are choosing not to make the people who wish to make money. Let's face it, people in private practice for counselling, they are set up as businesses. They do make profit because, unfortunately, so this island is expensive to live, and not everybody can afford to give their time away for free, especially when they've trained for, I think, like I said, level 4 counselling takes 4 years at minimum to qualify. And so that's worry. So that's, again, it's all a worry. So there's other aspects of life that we're learning more and more about. So now there is the neurodiversion. There's lots of people now discovering or getting diagnosed with some form of neurodiversion. And a lot of people, this is in their adult life. This is for people who now, as adults, they've lived their life experiencing something, and then to be found out that actually they have a condition which has impacted how they view life compared to the majority of others. And so as the Minister has made clear that he's not going to start an ADHD hub, well, so this would mean that there's not necessarily going to be an affordable place for people who are newly diagnosed with ADHD, trying to figure their lives out, of having a place to go. And I admit, yes, the Minister may not have the funds to do that, and he has the the reason to prioritise where he spends his funds, and he's not putting that as a priority. And I can respect that. However, so with people being unregulated who would be offering support to these people in the private sector where they are going to have to go, how do we know that these people are competent to deal with people who are facing these issues? There is training available to make sure that people can become competent in dealing and knowing how to deal with people with ADHD and autism and adults with autism. There is ways to manage, the ways to deal, the way to speak, ways to help these people, and so I do worry that people aren't qualified in which to do so. My other main fear as well, sir, comes from people who are unqualified when dealing with relationship therapy. Now, my wife is a specialist in relationship therapy. I think I've mentioned that before, sir, because I've never won an argument since. But she recounted a tale to me about a situation where domestic violence was present. I was like, oh, so how do you deal with that? And so she went through the processes that she'd learned, and she was in her training that, when domestic violence is present, that you can't provide therapy in that situation because there is a risk that anything that gets said and brought up in trying to manage the relationship in that room isn't going to spill over when you get home. And then that violence becomes worse. So the moment that you are aware of domestic violence in a relationship, there is a processes that you have to go through to make sure that everybody within that situation, sir, is safe. So when I see somebody advertising themselves with just a basic level 4 qualification, saying that they can offer relationship therapy, I worry, sir, because there could be an escalation of violence when it gets home if that's not accounted for. The psychotherapists that all came to see me were all telling me that, when they got their family therapy master's degree, sir, because that's what it is to become a family therapist, it's a master's degree. And they were telling me about the complexity, because you're not just dealing with 2 people, then you're talking families, so you're at least up to 3 in general. And so that's always quite, how can someone, even with a base level qualification, who's advertising this, where there's no level of account and recourse that I can go to say to somebody, hang on a second, that person is advertising themselves at something that they are not qualified to do. Either tell them to stop doing that, tell them to remove these adverts from their website and stop offering these services, or you're going to remove their membership and they will not be able to practice anymore. There has to be a line of accountability. So I had heard that, and I'm not sure whether this is true, but that maybe I hadn't been descriptive enough about what a therapeutic counsellor is. So, sir, I'll make it very clear now. A therapeutic counsellor is somebody who is helping somebody with mental health issues. This is not somebody who's giving them career advice. This is not somebody who is giving them education advice. This is not someone who's, because I've seen the latest one as a travel counsellor. This is not somebody who is going to help you find your holiday. This is somebody who is there to help you with your mental health, sir. So, again, I'll go back to my original wording of my proposition, requiring the registration with a governing body, because that's where accountability comes in. Subsequently, the Jersey Care Commission, because that would be the Jersey body that will collect all the information of the governing bodies so people can find that information easily. So there's a question about the costs that this will have to government I assess the work is going on in this area anyway. It may add more time to it, so yes, so that is a cost. It's not an exponential cost, but it is a cost. The Minister's comments paper suggests about complexity. So when you have a single plan and you're going to follow it, there is a complexity to doing that work to begin with, and to admit that, by adding something new to it does add an extra layer of complexity, but it doesn't make it complicated. There are systems, there are people, there is legislation that already looks and works in similar vein. I don't see why this can't be easily and swiftly replicated to achieve this, especially as it is already part of the Minister's legislative programme. So this, and like I said, I'll take it back to the human part of this for me. It's the part of the risk. and that there are people out there who will seek services, who will try to help manage their mental health, and they will try, and they'll do it all in good faith, and they will come across somebody, sir, who doesn't treat them the right way. It doesn't act within the ethics that a good governing body would have them to follow. And there is no recourse that person can take. But you're dealing with a vulnerable person. That person probably won't even know or even think to look at it. They'll make blame themselves, because that's what people during mental health crisis, a lot of people during mental health crisis do. They blame themselves. It wasn't the therapist's fault, it must be my fault. And things like that. So it's just so I just struggle that there is no accountability, there is no quality control on what people are offering. And so this is as light touch as it could be, while still maintaining a level of accountability. Lightest touch would be just making sure counsellors register with the Care Commission. So that's what, like, say, psychotherapists, clinical psychologists and chiropractors are allowed to do. But there's no accountability. The fact that dealing with vulnerable people, we should be insisting that anybody working with vulnerable people should be having a DBS check, but of course, as they're not registered and not required, there is no legal requirement for them to do so, sir. So, sir, I could probably talk in different ways around this for hours. It is a very, very complicated subject. I know there's a lot of people who are going to be against regulation for the sake of more regulation. Actually, there is one point I would make. Actually, I have spoken to the Care Commission, and they have given me permission to circulate an email afterwards about the costs that they think they would incur for taking on this. The answer is none. There'll be a fee that may be asked to be paid for by the therapeutic counsellors as they register. For me, that's a deterrent for anybody who wants to do malpractice. If they have no bad intentions, will have to pay for it, or maybe they won't bother. Maybe they'll move on to something else. But the Care Commission have confirmed that because they've updated their computer systems recently, sir, that they would not be expecting any extra funding to come from government to pay for any of this regulation from their side. So I had another thought in there, sir, but it appears to have left me at the moment. So, sir, I will leave this there, sir, and I'll listen to what other people have to say, but I'll make the final point. I think there is sometimes where we make red tape where red tape is unnecessary, but when it comes to people's health and well-being, I think we need red tape, we need regulation. We need people to know that the people that they go to see and ask for help are people that can be trusted, sir. So with that, sir, I make the proposition.
Proposition seconded? Yes. Does any member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Binet.
So as the principal responder, I think it might help to inform the debate and hopefully hasten the pace of it if I make my comments early. So I'm grateful to Deputy Coles for bringing this to the Assembly for consideration, and I'd certainly like to thank him for his constructive engagement over the past couple of weeks. The proposition aims to reduce a possible risk posed by unaccredited counsellors practising in Jersey without the required qualifications and experience. And certainly on the face of it, that might seem like a very good idea. However, introducing legislation to regulate counsellors would not be, in my view, a proportionate or effective way to do this, for reasons that I shall endeavour to explain. Firstly, we don't have any evidence to suggest that there's sufficient risk to Islanders to warrant regulation. We've sought advice from the National Counselling and Psychotherapy Society, the NCPS, and they say that reports of counsellors practising without qualifications is relatively unheard of. And that's precisely why, sir, the UK doesn't regulate. So, if that's the case, what is the evidence to suggest that a small jurisdiction like Jersey should implement additional layers of bureaucracy? Secondly, it would burden the counselling profession with red tape. And as Deputy Coles, I think, would concede, regulation would certainly incur costs for counsellors. And I'm afraid to say that whatever the Care Commission have said, there must be some additional cost there, unless all of that cost is going to fall to the counsellors, in which case I wouldn't think they'd be desperately impressed. So as we all know, mental health support is in high demand, and a lot of this work is carried out on a part-time or voluntary basis. And if we overburden the profession locally, we risk driving people away from the profession and losing vital counselling provision on the island. Another consideration is online counselling. More and more people are accessing counselling services online, and they can be based absolutely anywhere. So how would online counsellors be captured by this regulation? I think the answer to that is that we all know they couldn't. So we have to question how effective this regulatory framework could ever be. We can protect the title therapeutic counsellor in law, but unqualified counsellors could simply use the word coach or hypnotherapist or any similar title to evade being registered and continue to practice unaffected by the law. In addition, we have to take account of the fact that there is no statutory regulator for counsellors in the UK. But 11 accrediting bodies are recognised by the UK professional standards authorities, and we would have to make arrangements with some of those to register our counsellors voluntarily. The second biggest of these bodies is the NCPS, and they just don't see how this could work. There will be nothing in the UK law to enforce compliance, so any regulation we implement would effectively be meaningless, unless, of course, the professional standards by which counsellors are to be regulated and the enforcement measures required to police those professional standards are set up under the Jersey Care Commission. And so this would be extremely novel, as the JCC doesn't operate in this way in any other area that it currently regulates, given that the JCC regulates services and not professionals. So this would place an administrative burden and extra cost on our counsellors and the Care Commission, and that's a burden that will not exist anywhere else in the British Isles. And as already explained, there would be numerous ways to circumvent that legislation. Instead, and as you may have read in the comments paper, I propose we adopt a cheaper, simpler and more proportionate method and simply communicate with the public to raise awareness of the possible risk of unqualified counsellors. A campaign would be arranged to encourage local counsellors to maintain membership with UK accrediting bodies, then encourage the public to check a therapeutic counsellor's credentials on the accrediting body's register before engaging their services. So whilst I'm grateful to Deputy Coles for bringing this proposition for consideration, I don't believe we can afford to continue regulating everything that moves, burdening service providers and increasing the size and cost of the state. Accordingly, and with due respect to Deputy Coles, and I certainly hope his wife will forgive me, I ask the Assembly to reject the proposition and support my undertaking to deliver an effective public awareness campaign. Thank you, sir.
Very much. Deputy Scott.
Thank you, sir. I have a lot of sympathy for this proposition and I recognise its positive intent. And in that positive intent is a meritable desire that one should prevent harm being done to islanders. And that links into the quality of services that are given to islanders in certain areas. I have sometimes mentioned in the States Assembly a bit of a concern about developing policies in silos. And I think there's a general theme here in terms of the often islanders who need help have to navigate what can be a bewildering number of options. And there's lots of nuances here. We're not just talking about therapeutic counselling, we're talking about therapists practicing in all manner of different areas. It could be cognitive behavioural therapy, it could be emotional freedom technique. There's so many ways in which you've got people on the island who are saying, I can help you in a certain way by offering you this type of service. So I do very much accept the principle that no deputy should be supporting a cowboy culture, despite the name of our office. It's in our community's interest that people delivering services are adequately skilled. And indeed, that does fit in with an overall government ambition that people providing services, that we improve skills generally in this community. And we need to, I believe, develop a consistent approach because we've already are having work on one area, which was estate agents, and indeed, and we've got to start thinking, well, why are we saying that we should have a certain level of regulation here as opposed to another area. And I suppose, you know, a crude example, if I find somebody who baked me a cake and the cake goes wrong, okay, I've got a cake I can't eat, and that's probably actually good for my health. But on the other hand, when it comes to certain services, the potential financial loss, the potential damage to health could be enormous. I believe what the Minister for Health, of course, has raised certain issues, including, I believe, the fact that we do have, yet again, it comes up again, a limited time in which to achieve things as a States Assembly when it comes to legislative amendments. I do recognise the desire not to have more red tape, but I do also recognise a need, and I believe that actual need perhaps needs to be addressed at our business licensing regime. At the moment, you can get a licence for a business. There's no charge for it. Should that change depending on what you are actually providing? So I believe that there is more consideration to be done. I don't think it's just in the Minister for Health's department. I think in lots of other areas too. And if Deputy Coles and I do happen to be in the next States Assembly together, I very much would welcome the opportunity to work more in this area with him, and indeed other States members who feel that there is some need to really start developing this area generally.
Thank you very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? Deputy Miles.
Thank you, sir. And I've listened to what's been said with great interest, and I'd just like to apply some of my comments, really. I think we're all told that mental health is a cornerstone of human health and happiness, vital for individuals to have access to professional support as they navigate the complexities of life, heal from trauma, and overcome mental health challenges. Counsellors play an essential role in this process, offering empathy, guidance and expertise to help clients reach a healthier mental state. And I believe that the current lack of regulation in Jersey might pose a risk to both the profession and those seeking support. I think that the regulation of counsellors is necessary to ensure the safety of clients. When people seek counselling, they often do so at their most vulnerable moments, dealing with grief, anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues. They place immense trust in the counsellor's expertise, believing that they're qualified to provide effective and ethical care. Without regulation, islands have no guarantee that those counsellors possess the necessary training and qualifications to serve clients competently. Any unregulated profession opens the door for unethical or untrained individuals to set themselves up as counsellors. There's no doubt that the vast majority of counsellors are dedicated professionals, but there is also no doubt that there may well be risk that the lack of oversight might result in harm to clients. The government have clearly stated that they are prepared to accept this risk. Mishandling of sensitive issues, a lack of competence or understanding of boundaries, or breaches of confidentiality can have devastating consequences for clients and their families. Regulation would establish standardised qualifications and practices, minimising the risk of such incidents. We can't do anything about the rise of online and remote counselling services, but support for this proposition would ensure that clients who choose an on-island service can trust the qualifications and practices of counsellors and have a robust complaints mechanism. I believe that regulation is equally important for maintaining the integrity of the counselling profession itself. And as with any profession, be it medicine, social work, law, education or policing, standards, codes of conduct and accountability mechanisms are essential for assuring practitioners uphold the values and ethics of their chosen occupation. Indeed, sir, we have rather a comprehensive set of standing orders. A scan of the Jersey Care Commission website shows the list of professions in Jersey that require registration. It's a very long list, including the obvious like nurses, paramedics and midwives, and perhaps the less obvious like dietitians, art therapists and podiatrists. And whereas psychotherapy is included, counsellors are not. Perhaps most surprisingly, if I wanted to get a tattoo or a body piercing, I could be very assured that the therapist is registered with the Care Commission. If I suffer a terrible loss or seek support from a counsellor, the person sitting opposite me has no requirement whatsoever to put themselves forward to the scrutiny of the Care Commission, an organisation in Jersey that is trusted to be transparent, fair and impartial. So in Jersey, counsellors can operate with no accountability, and I believe that might risk harm to vulnerable clients. The Jersey Care Commission would also provide a mechanism for addressing malpractice and misconduct. I believe Deputy Coles is correct when he said, we don't have the evidence because there's nowhere to complain to. When counsellors breach ethical standards or engage in harmful practices, regulatory bodies can intervene to investigate and hold individuals accountable. And this oversight protects clients, but also upholds the integrity of the profession. I commend Deputy Coles for bringing this proposition. I'd actually mistakenly assumed that counsellors were in fact already bound to registration with a professional body and the Care Commission. Regulation and registration is essential for upholding public trust in mental health services as a whole. Trust is the foundation of any therapeutic relationship. Without it, I'm not sure how clients can fully engage with the counselling process or benefit from its potential. Regulation fosters trust, providing assurances that counsellors are competent, ethical and accountable. This government has been very vocal in their dislike for regulation, arguing that regulation imposes unnecessary bureaucracy, stifles innovation and creates barriers to business. I would argue that some areas must be regulated. Counselling practice is not the same as building a conservatory or changing an internal door. The goal of regulation is not to create hurdles, but to ensure quality and safety. And by establishing clear pathways for education, training and qualification, regulation supports counsellors in becoming competent professionals whilst protecting clients. Whilst the professional organisations and peer accountability mechanisms that are currently available are valuable, they're not a substitute for formal regulation. Self-regulation lacks the authority to enforce mandatory standards or investigate misconduct effectively. Formal regulatory framework complements and strengthens existing self-regulatory practices, creating a robust system of oversight. I have read the comments from the Council of Ministers very carefully, and I have to say that I don't agree with them. I don't agree that a public awareness campaign is a suitable alternative to a regulatory framework. The regulation of counsellors is not merely a matter of policy, it is a matter of principle. It is a commitment to ensuring the safety and well-being of islanders, preserving the integrity of the profession and fostering trust in mental health services. Regulation is not about imposing unnecessary restrictions, but about creating a framework that supports and protects everyone. Mental health is far too important to leave to chance, and I will be supporting this proposition. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Does any other member wish to speak on the proposition? If no other member wishes to speak, Deputy Joseph.
So I'm just going to stand and say that I'm rising really to be somewhat aghast at the previous speaker. I should declare, sir, that I'm one of those people that has been adult ADHD confirmed. I am one of those people. I've said it openly. The more people say it, the more people can understand the challenges that people have. But what I would say is, as challenging as things are, I think the Minister is absolutely correct in to say that there is priorities, and priorities are that notwithstanding the very difficult challenges that people have, the Minister has said regulation is easily circumnavigatable. It is. It's not practiced in elsewhere. And frankly, if this Assembly continues on its journey towards regulating everything, we're going to create more problems for our island community in the future, in my view, sir. And so I urge members to, whilst absolutely sympathising with the many people who have mental health challenges,
I don't think ADHD is a mental health challenge. It's a much misunderstood thing, which means education is needed. But I look to the Health Minister and the Minister for Environment and want them to prioritise the important work to making Jersey a more healthy place, a better place, and in the Planning Minister's area, to make all the work that his officials have got to do in making our planning system work in priority over regulating something that isn't regulated anywhere else in the world. So, and I will be, while sympathising with the Deputy's proposals, I think that this Assembly should not be, if I may say so, Sir, bringing forward another proposal. We have got other issues like regulation of cannabis and medicinal cannabis that the Minister must deal with, which is an extremely serious matter. And I would say that that is far more important than the, no doubt, risk issue that the Deputy brings forward. I know he does so with passion, but we have to prioritise our resources, sir, and this member will be prioritising the resources for the Health and Planning Minister so that we can make Jersey a better place on really serious issues, which I don't think that he's explained why this is such a serious issue in this particular area of regulation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Does any other member wish to speak? Wilson.
Thank you, sir. I just want to commend Deputy Coles for bringing the proposition forward, but sadly at this moment in time I feel as though I cannot support the proposition as it stands. I mean, clearly the regulation of therapeutic counsellors is an issue around public safety and professional standards, but it's also an issue of proportionality. And I would propose that we already have therapeutic counsellors formally regulated through their regulated profession, i.e. through a nurse, doctor, psychologist or whatever. And I think what he has raised is an important issue about protected title. And of course, protected titles are given by established bodies like the Nursing and Midwifery Council, the General Medical Council, so that these titles can't be abused. So I absolutely get his point about anybody being able to call one a counsellor, but the issue is how do we actually make sure that we do raise in the public's mind that there are protections around those professions who are already regulated, who call themselves therapeutic practitioners, and therefore I think the proposal to actually raise public awareness and a campaign on this should be welcomed. I don't think that we've actually heard any particular issues that have come to light that are causing public concern. I mean, I think we really do need to make sure that we understand the risk to public safety, the risk to public harm, and through the debate this morning, we haven't really heard, you know, what the level of harm is, the scale of the harm, how many people are experiencing this. And I accept that there is an issue that people don't know where to go, but there are two places that people can go. And I think because for the private sector, in terms of private counselling, we are have our consumer protection laws in place. And so you can actually be subject, you can actually access any legal avenues there if you feel that you've actually got a case for particular negligence or harm in any way. But we also do have the Care Commission, and for every regulated profession on the island who has therapeutic counselling responsibilities, we already have those protections in place, and I'm sure the Care Commission would act accordingly. I think the key question for this proposition is, does the level of risk justify the scale of statutory regulation that Deputy Coles is proposing? And I think that in contrast to some of the other other professions where there is a scale of self-regulation which is perfectly acceptable to maintain safety and good governance and accountability. We see that in, for example, the accountancy area, the architects profession, and also we have the health and social care support workers who work with a voluntary code of practice rather than formal regulation. So it raises questions: why do therapeutic counsellors, why are we treating these any differently from any other self-regulating profession? I think the other point that I would make is that the approach going forward, and I accept that there will need to be some rebalancing of the ensuring quality standards and on avoiding unnecessary red tape can be achieved. But we must, while Deputy Cole's proposal comes from a place of genuine concern, I do feel that it is too broad, too bureaucratic, and too inconsistent with our current regulatory philosophy. I think we should be making sure that we take an evidence-based approach to all of the decisions that we make, and that applies to regulation as well, without stifling the accessibility and the quality of access to counselling service. So I would urge the Assembly to consider those points and perhaps to consider rejecting this on the basis of allowing us to make sure that regulation doesn't actually be a barrier for some people accessing counselling and support that it might otherwise do if this proposition was supported.
Very much. Deputy Gardner.
Thank you, sir. Actually, I'm really pleased to follow Deputy Wilson, because what she raised, I wasn't aware about therapeutic counselling registrations that are already in place, because when this proposition was launched, my initial response was similar to Deputy Miles, saying how we don't have it in place, because counsellors do need to understand deep psychology, the process that people are going through, and it can be damaging. I mean, the bad counsellor can damage, and when we have mental health high demand, it really needs to be ensured that the counsellor is ready and fully qualified to do the work. As somebody who was initially trained as a social worker, and through my professional career I've gone lots of different courses, including counselling and coaching and facilitating. I think why I'm, after listening for everyone, because I really came open to this debate, because it's for me the foundation of and proper training and proper supervising in these areas is really important. But listening for this, I feel that the first step, which is important to do, it's actually to educate our public. Even when I was listening to Deputy Cole's presentation, which was very deep, and somebody who does know about this area, even I got some time lost, like that, with all these letters and qualifications. What is important really, that we'll have 1 page or 2 pages, that if I'm considering to do counselling, I can go there and public will be aware where to go and to see what legitimate training and where the counsellor need to be registered with some professional bodies, and what is just maybe 10 hours on website. And I know there are, unfortunately, somebody who can claim that they're counsel and somebody who can claim that they're coaches. There is lots of misunderstanding where is the boundary lies between counsellor, therapist, coach, and I can find maybe other words that actually, if it's family therapist or family counsellor, it's a grief counsellor, if it's a crisis counsellor, if it's crisis intervention specialist, emotional support facilitator, coach, all of them are important. But I think since it started to be really vast, And I think it's extremely important that people know what to look. Personally, when I look into coach, sometimes maybe coach have basic qualification as a coach certificate, but if you're looking that the person they've done undergraduate in psychology and done something else in master's and a PhD in communication and done some counselling qualifications, maybe not to level 5 because it's a work, I would consider, but people need to be educated how they're looking through the CVs of the people, of the potential counselors or coaches or therapists or specialists, and they will make a decision. I think what's really, really important is to make very clear evidence-based decision, but people need to know what they look for. And this, at least as a first step, and if it will not work, we can continue. I think really important to take the first step, to put this guidance, to put this clear, and it's to educate people what to look at. And if we will find evidence, and it might come that in another year or 2 or 3 we'll feel they must be registered, and we specify who needs to be registered, we always can take the next step. But I think the first step, let's educate our residents.
Very much. Deputy Luce.
Thank you, sir. As Deputy Cole said at the outset, he and I met early on in this and had a discussion about regulation of counselling. As members know, Care Commission is under my remit, and we would have to be taking on responsibility for that. And Deputy Coles will know, and as many others have indicated, the importance of counselling to people who seek it. And the importance of making sure that people get the right sort of treatment is really, really important. The Deputy knows, because I told him that, and as members will know, the Care Commission are currently putting in place the final little bits and pieces so that we can get on and regulate the hospital and the ambulance service for the next election. Hopefully that's going to start. And he also knows, because I've told him, that the Health Minister and I have indicated that we would very much like to move then to the regulation of cannabis prescribers in Jersey, because we are aware, and we do have some data to show that that situation needs to be regularised. I can't agree more than Deputy Gardner has just said many of the things I would wish to say. I think, for me, the one standout thing to read in the paperwork before debate is the Health Minister's suggestion, which I think really merits consideration, which is to avoid the red tape, avoid the time, the resource, the cash, and the complications, and of course the difficulties with, once you regulate counsellors, if they move to call themselves something else, how those that you would wish really to regulate fall out of the net. The proposal, I think, from the Health Minister to embark on a publicity campaign to alert people to say, if you're going to seek counselling, look for these qualifications, look for people who are registered to this body, look for people who can genuinely do the job for you, stands us in much better stead in the immediate short term than the decision to go for regulation, because that will take time, it will take money and resource. Money and resource not important in this issue, but it will take time. And in that intervening time, we could be doing better. The good that the Health Minister proposes in that campaign could be alerting people to make sure that they go to the right people to seek the right care, because mental health issues really, really need to be cared for in the proper way, as we all agree. I mean, all of us agree with that. I'll finish just by saying, Deputy Gardner said in the medium term, it may well be that this comes back, and it may well be the case. But I would say to members, read the Health Minister's paper, read the suggestion that he's come up about the publicity, and vote accordingly. Thank you, sir.
Very much, Deputy. There are 2 other members who have indicated a desire to speak. There may well be others. The time has been reached when I can reasonably ask if members wish to adjourn until 2:15 or to continue.
I think we should continue, sir.
The mood seems to be continued. If anyone wishes to speak against that, very well, Sorry, yes, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I would like to speak against that. So we have the afternoon scheduled to be in this assembly. I know this won't be in the forefront of every member's minds, but continuing through lunchtime causes me great inconvenience with government business that I was meant to be undertaking during our lunch break.
Thank you. In which case, if we are to continue, that should be the basis of a proposition. Does anyone wish to propose we continue?
Yes, please, sir.
Very well. Is that seconded? Does any member wish to speak? Very well. Those in favour? I beg your pardon. Yes, Deputy Kovac.
Sorry, at the same time, people made probably plans for a lunch as a government business, as Deputy Deputy Samezek said. But equally, my mother-in-law is waiting for me and have plans.
Deputy Tadier?
Yes, sir. I mean, I'm likely to speak on this. It's something I'm quite concerned about, and I was hoping to hear from other members when they speak. So I don't think sitting through lunch is necessarily going to get us finished at any given time. And given that other members seem to have made arrangements, I don't think we should rush through this.
Very well. Thank you very much, Deputy Coles.
Yes, I just thought I'd rise as the proposer of the now suspended debate, technically, as we're very much including to that. 5 minutes. I would like to have the lunch break now so I can hear everybody's comments without them feeling rushed and that they're interfering with other people's lunch breaks and or business.
Very well. Any other member wish to speak? I suspect the right thing to do, given there are people off. Deputy Gorst?
It was my proposition, sir, was it not?
Oh yes, sorry. You didn't speak in since. Would you like to respond?
Well, as we do have time before the lunch break, sir, I thought I might. I do understand, sir, that members have got arrangements, as I have, government business at lunchtime and throughout all of the afternoon, because members are busy and they have to balance and prioritise their time appropriately. I, of course, look forward to Deputy Tadier speaking for his allotted 15 minutes and the other two members as well. I still think it makes more sense and better use of members' time if we continue this debate, because experience would tell us if we come back after lunch, we will fill the afternoon. Thank you.
Well, does any other member wish to... Oh, sorry, you've already responded. Right, I'm going to take a deep breath and get the procedure correct in my head. Very well. Do you call for the appeal, or because there are members of...
Yes, I think I ought to, sir. Thank you.
Very well.
So what is the vote?
Sorry?
What's pour?
The vote. Pour will be we continue through the lunch hour. Contre will be we move to adjourn now. Very well. I invite members to return to their seats. And the vote, a vote pour is that we continue to debate this matter. Contre is that we adjourn over the lunch. And I ask the greffier to open the voting and members to vote. If members have had the opportunity of casting their vote, I ask the greffier to close the voting. The proposition is defeated. 19 votes pour, 20 votes contre. And accordingly, we stand adjourned until 2:15.